The flames are roaring. Blue fire meets red in the sky above the Fire Nation Palace, crackling with the raw power of Sozin's comet. Zuko faces his sister in an Agni Kai that will determine the fate of a nation, lightning dancing between Azula's fingers as her mind fractures under the weight of paranoia and perfection. This is the moment everything has been building toward, the culmination of a lifetime of rivalry, pain, and the desperate need for approval. But this moment? It started 13 years earlier, with a different Agni Kai, a different opponent, and a scar that would define a lifetime. Picture this: a war room in the Fire Nation Palace, where military strategy is discussed by generals who've spent decades perfecting the art of conquest. Young Prince Zuko, barely 13, sits quietly in the corner. He's been invited to observe, a privilege, an honour, a glimpse into his future as Fire Lord. His father expects him to learn, to absorb the wisdom of experienced commanders planning their next campaign against the Earth Kingdom. Then someone suggests a strategy, a plan that involves sacrificing an entire division of new recruits as a distraction, throwing fresh soldiers into a meat grinder so veterans can flank the enemy. These aren't nameless numbers on a map. These are people, Fire Nation citizens, young men barely older than Zuko himself. And he can't stay silent. He speaks out. Not with elaborate rhetoric or political manoeuvring, just the simple objection of someone who still believes honour means something beyond victory. The room goes quiet. Generals exchange glances. You don't interrupt your superiors. You definitely don't question military strategy when you're a teenage prince with zero combat experience. But Zuko doesn't understand the rules yet. He thinks honour is about protecting your people, not using them as expendable pawns. He's about to learn a very different lesson. The challenge comes not from the general he spoke against, but from Fire Lord Ozai himself. An Agni Kai, a formal fire duel to settle the matter of disrespect. Zuko accepts because refusing would be even worse, would prove he's a coward in addition to being insubordinate. He prepares to face the general, probably loses sleep over it, maybe even trains extra hard with his uncle. Then comes the day of the duel. The arena is packed with spectators because public humiliation is kind of the Fire Nation's thing. Zuko walks in ready to prove himself, ready to show his father that speaking up for what's right doesn't make you weak. He takes his position, assumes his fighting stance, and looks up at his opponent. It's his father, Fire Lord Ozai himself, standing across from his own son. The rules have changed. This isn't about the general anymore, if it ever was. This is about a father teaching his son what happens when you step out of line, when you show weakness, when you dare to have compassion in a nation built on domination. And Zuko? He refuses to fight. Not because he can't. He's a skilled firebender by this point, trained since childhood. He refuses because fighting your own father feels wrong on every level. He begs for mercy, prostrates himself, demonstrates exactly the kind of submission Ozai wanted to see from the beginning. It doesn't matter. Ozai moves forward anyway, and the entire arena watches as the Fire Lord burns his own son's face. The smell of charring flesh, the sound of Zuko's screams, the image of a 13-year-old boy crumpling to the ground while his father stands over him, making a point for everyone to witness. The scar isn't the worst thing his father gave him that day. It's the lesson underneath. Love is conditional, honour is a weapon, and compassion will always be punished. But wait, it gets worse. Because surviving the Agni Kai isn't the end of Zuko's nightmare, it's the beginning. Ozai banishes his own son from the Fire Nation, strips him of his birthright and sends him on what everyone knows is an impossible mission. Capture the Avatar, the master of all four elements, the bridge between the human and spirit worlds. Oh, and there's a small problem with this assignment. The Avatar has been missing for 100 years. Zuko is being sent to find a myth, a legend, someone who probably died a century ago when the Fire Nation wiped out the air nomads in a single, brutal genocide. This isn't a mission. It's exile with extra steps. It's a way for Ozai to get rid of his disappointing son without technically killing him, maintaining the appearance of mercy while ensuring Zuko spends the rest of his life chasing an impossible dream. The cruelty is elegant in its efficiency, but here's where it gets interesting, because someone volunteers to go with him. Uncle Iroh, the Dragon of the West, legendary general, former heir to the Fire Nation throne, requests permission to accompany his nephew into exile. ostensibly to supervise, to ensure Zuko doesn't embarrass the family further. Really? Iroh has his own reasons, his own grief, his own understanding that sending a traumatized teenager alone into the world is basically a death sentence. What Zuko doesn't know is that his uncle had his own reasons for joining this seemingly hopeless quest. Reasons involving a dead son, a failed siege, and the understanding that power without wisdom destroys everything it touches, so they leave. Zuko with his fresh scar, his burning shame, and his desperate need to prove himself worthy of his father's love. Iroh with his tea, his patience, and his quiet determination to save his nephew from becoming another casualty of the Fire Nation's brutality. The ship is small, the crew is minimal, and everyone knows this is a dead-end assignment. You don't come back from finding the Avatar because the Avatar doesn't exist anymore. They're chasing a ghost across an ocean, and the only thing waiting at the end is disappointment. Except Zuko can't accept that. He refuses to believe this is exile. In his mind, this is temporary. A test, a trial, a chance to prove his honor and come home. He throws himself into the search with obsessive intensity, tracking every rumor, investigating every whisper, pushing his crew to exhaustion as they sail from port to port finding nothing. His relationship with the crew is complicated. He's technically their prince, but he's also banished, scarred, desperate. Some pity him, others resent being stuck on this pointless mission. A few, like Lieutenant G, develop grudging respect for his determination. But respect doesn't mean they believe in the mission. They're just following orders, counting days until they can return to the Fire Nation and get real assignments. Iroh tries to balance Zuko's obsession with, basic human needs like rest, food, and not working yourself to death before you turn 15. He suggests tea breaks, meditation, perhaps enjoying the journey instead of fixating solely on the destination. Zuko interprets this as laziness, as his uncle not taking the mission seriously, as further proof that nobody believes in him. The fights are spectacular. Zuko yelling about honor and destiny while Iroh calmly explains that honor without wisdom is just stubbornness. Iroh suggesting they stop at a market for supplies, while Zuko insists they need to chase another dead-end lead. The crew watching these arguments like a spectator sport, placing bets on who wins each round. Spoiler, Iroh always wins eventually, usually because Zuko passes out from exhaustion and wakes up to find they've docked at a port with excellent tea shops. Years pass like this. 3 years of searching, of false leads, of Zuko growing from a traumatized 13-year-old into an angry, desperate 16-year-old. His scar becomes part of his identity, a constant reminder of his failure, his shame, his mission. He perfects his fire bending through relentless practice, channeling his rage and frustration into flames that burn hotter every year. He becomes exactly what his father designed him to be, a weapon without a target, anger without release, obsession without fulfillment. Until one night, something changes. The ship is anchored near the South Pole, because even though they've searched everywhere else a dozen times, Zuko insists on checking again. The crew is exhausted. Iroh is trying to brew tea in sub-zero temperatures, and Zuko is in his cabin staring at maps he's memorized years ago. Then the sky lights up. A beam of pure, brilliant light shoots into the air from somewhere in the ice, bright enough to be seen for miles, powerful enough that even someone without spiritual sensitivity can feel it in their bones. And when that beam of light shot into the sky from the South Pole, everything changed. Not just for the world, but for the banished prince who'd been searching for a ghost. The energy is unmistakable, unique, powerful in a way that makes firebending look like party tricks. Zuko knows, instantly and completely, that he's just witnessed something connected to the Avatar. After 3 years of nothing, after 100 years of absence, the Avatar has just announced their presence to the entire world. For a moment, Zuko stands frozen on the deck, watching that light fade into the aurora-lit sky. His crew emerges from below, murmuring in confusion, excitement, fear. Iroh places a hand on his shoulder, says something about destiny and caution. But Zuko doesn't hear any of it. He's already moving, already shouting orders, already plotting a course toward the source of that light. Because this is it, the moment he's been waiting for, training for, obsessing over for 3 years. The Avatar is real. The Avatar is here, and Zuko is going to capture them and go home. The hunt that's about to begin will test everything Zuko thinks he knows about honor, destiny, and himself. He expects to find a powerful master, probably an adult, definitely someone who'll put up a serious fight. He's prepared for an epic confrontation, a battle worthy of legends. He is not prepared for a 12-year-old bald kid riding a 10-ton flying bison, but that's getting ahead of things. Right now, in this moment, as Zuko's ship cuts through icy waters toward the South Pole, he feels hope for the first time in 3 years. Real, genuine hope that maybe, just maybe, he can go home. That his father will accept him. That his honor will be restored. The scar on his face throbs in the cold air, a reminder of the cost of failure. He touches it unconsciously, the burned skin rough under his fingers, and makes a silent promise to himself. He won't fail again. He can't. Everything depends on this. Behind him, Iroh watches his nephew with worry etched into every line of his face. Because Iroh knows something Zuko hasn't learned yet. That going home isn't the same as coming home. That honor gained through violence isn't really honor, and that sometimes the thing you're searching for isn't the thing you actually need. But Zuko isn't ready for those lessons yet. He's 16, desperate, and convinced that one successful mission will fix everything broken in his life. He's about to meet a kid who can bend all 4 elements, who represents hope for the entire world, who is technically the only thing standing between the Fire Nation and total domination. And Zuko's going to try to capture him, repeatedly. With increasingly ridiculous plans that somehow occasionally almost work. The next few months are going to be interesting. What Zuko doesn't know, what he can't know yet, is that chasing the Avatar won't lead him home. It'll lead him to himself, to questions about what honor actually means, about whether his father's approval is worth the cost, about the difference between destiny and choice. But first, he's got to actually find this Avatar, track him down, probably fight a Southern Water Tribe warrior wielding a boomerang and a determination that matches Zuko's own intensity. Oh, and there's the matter of a flying bison, because apparently the universe decided that a century-old conflict needed giant flying mammals involved. The Fire Nation prepared for everything except aerial assault by furry livestock. As Zuko's ship approaches the source of that light, as his crew readies for whatever they're about to find, as Iroh quietly brews tea and prepares for disaster, one thing becomes clear: the world is about to get a whole lot more complicated. For everyone involved, this encounter at the South Pole will change everything. For Aang, it's the beginning of his journey to master all 4 elements and defeat the Fire Lord. For Katara and Sokka, it's the start of an adventure that'll take them across the world. But for Zuko, it's the beginning of the longest, most painful, most transformative journey of his life. A journey that'll take him from banished prince to refugee to traitor to hero. A journey that'll force him to confront everything he believes about honor, family, and himself. All because a bald kid and his friends accidentally got frozen in an iceberg 100 years ago and picked the worst possible time to wake up. Honestly, if there was an award for most consequential nap in history, Aang would win it by several centuries. But that's a story for the next section. Right now, Zuko is sailing toward his destiny, convinced he's about to capture the Avatar and restore his honor. He has no idea he's actually sailing toward the best thing that ever happened to him, even if it'll take 3 years, 2 betrayals, and 1 aggressive redemption arc for him to figure that out. The Southern Water Tribe is about to have a very bad day, and it starts with Zuko's ship breaking through the ice wall like an angry metal serpent. The villagers have maybe 30 seconds to process what's happening, before Fire Nation soldiers are pouring onto the snow and their peaceful morning turns into a scene from their worst nightmares. Zuko strides off his ship with the energy of someone who's been waiting 3 years for this exact moment. He's focused, determined, and absolutely not prepared for a teenage Water Tribe warrior to charge at him with a boomerang and what can only be described as weaponized audacity. Sokka doesn't stand a chance. Zuko's a trained firebender and Sokka is, well, Sokka, but the kid's got heart. And a boomerang that actually comes back, which is more than most warriors can say about their weapons. The confrontation is quick and brutal. Zuko demands the Avatar. The villagers, reasonably confused because they've been living in isolation for decades, have no idea what he's talking about. An old woman steps forward. Gran, though Zuko doesn't know that, and her eyes hold the kind of grief that comes from living through genocide. She knows exactly what the Fire Nation is capable of, and she's watching it arrive at her doorstep again. Then a kid drops out of the sky on a flying bison. Literally drops out of the sky, riding on an animal that has no business being aerodynamic, wearing orange robes and sporting the most distinctive arrow tattoos Zuko has ever seen. The Avatar. The actual real, very much alive Avatar. For a second everyone just stares. Aang at the Fire Nation ship destroying his new friend's village. Zuko at the 12-year-old child who represents 3 years of obsessive searching. Sokka at the flying bison, probably wondering if hypothermia causes hallucinations. Aang surrenders. Just walks up and offers himself in exchange for the village's safety, which is either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, depending on your perspective. Zuko doesn't care which. He's got the Avatar, his mission is complete, and he's going home. Finally, after 3 years of failure and shame, he's succeeded. Except nothing about capturing the Avatar turns out to be simple, because this 12-year-old is somehow the most powerful bender on the planet, and also has the survival instincts of someone who's spent 100 years not being hunted. The moment Aang is on Zuko's ship, the escape attempts begin. First, Aang tries talking his way out, all friendly and optimistic, asking Zuko about his scar with the tact of someone who's been frozen for a century and missed all the social cue updates. Zuko is not interested in making friends. He's interested in getting home, restoring his honour, and never thinking about the last 3 years again. He locks Aang in the hold, posts guards, and starts calculating how quickly they can reach the Fire Nation. Then Katara and Sokka show up on Appa, because apparently rescue mission translates to 2 teenagers and a flying bison versus an entire Fire Nation ship. The fight that follows is chaos in the best way. Katara's learning waterbending in real time, Sokka's boomerang is doing things that violate physics, and Aang is redirecting fireballs while maintaining a cheerful attitude that absolutely infuriates Zuko. They escape. Of course they escape. And Zuko's ship is damaged, his crew is exhausted, and his one chance at going home just flew away on a 10-ton sky bison. This sets the pattern for the next several months. Zuko chases, Aang runs, they fight, Aang escapes. Repeat. It would be monotonous, except each encounter reveals something new about both of them. Zuko's desperation grows with every failure, his attacks becoming more aggressive, his plans more reckless. Aang starts understanding that this isn't just some Fire Nation soldier following orders, this is someone personally invested in capturing him, someone whose entire life depends on this mission. Iroh watches all of this with increasing concern, offering advice that Zuko consistently ignores. Rest, nephew. Strategy, nephew. Perhaps consider that the universe is trying to tell you something, nephew, but Zuko can't hear it over the sound of his own shame and determination. The encounter with the pirates is peak Zuko energy. Team Avatar accidentally steals a waterbending scroll, the pirates want it back, Zuko wants the Avatar, and everyone ends up in a 3-way confrontation that somehow involves Sokka trying to negotiate, while Katara learns waterbending moves from a stolen scroll mid-battle. The pirates actually team up with Zuko for a hot second, which tells you everything about how chaotic this situation has become. When the smoke clears, Aang has escaped again, the pirates are furious, and Zuko has managed to make enemies of literally everyone involved. It's almost impressive how efficiently he can turn every situation into a disaster. But then something shifts. As the weeks pass and Zuko continues his pursuit, tracking Team Avatar across the Earth Kingdom, his tactics start changing. He's learning, adapting, becoming more strategic and less purely aggressive. And somewhere in all of this, his crew starts seeing him differently, not just as a banished prince, but as their leader. Someone who refuses to give up despite impossible odds. Lieutenant G, who's been skeptical this whole time, starts showing actual respect after Zuko saves the crew during a storm, putting their safety above his mission. It's a small moment, barely acknowledged, but it plants a seed. Maybe honor isn't just about catching the Avatar, maybe it's also about taking care of the people depending on you. Iroh notices the change, says nothing, and continues brewing tea with the knowing patience of someone who understands that people can't be rushed into wisdom. They have to stumble into it themselves, preferably with minimum casualties. Then comes the Blue Spirit incident, and everything gets complicated in ways Zuko doesn't have the emotional vocabulary to process. Aang gets captured by Zhao. Yes, Commander Zhao, Zuko's rival, the guy who represents everything Zuko could become if he loses the last shreds of his humanity. Zhao is holding Aang in a fortress, planning to deliver the Avatar to the Fire Lord himself, taking credit for Zuko's work. This, more than anything, drives Zuko to action. Not justice, not righteousness, pure, petty refusal to let Zhao steal his prize. He dons a blue spirit mask, infiltrates the fortress, and breaks Aang out in a sequence of events that is somehow both badass and deeply contradictory. Here's where it gets philosophically interesting. Zuko saves Aang's life, repeatedly, fights through dozens of Fire Nation soldiers to free the Avatar, working together with perfect synchronization, like they've been partners for years instead of enemies for months. They move through the fortress like dancers, Aang's airbending complementing the blue spirit's dual swords, neither one speaking but both understanding the rhythm of combat. When they escape and collapse in the forest, exhausted, Aang asks who he is. The blue spirit doesn't answer, just vanishes into the trees, leaving Aang confused and Zuko grappling with what he's just done. Because he saved the Avatar, the person he's supposed to capture saved the very target of his mission from someone else capturing them. The logic is broken, the reasoning doesn't track, and somewhere deep down where Zuko refuses to look, he knows why he did it. This isn't about capturing the Avatar anymore. It's about him being the one to do it. It's about control, about agency, about proving himself on his own terms. Also, he really, really hates Zhao. Their rivalry intensifies after this. Zhao gets promoted to admiral, gains command of a fleet, and starts treating Zuko like an amusing distraction rather than a legitimate threat. He offers Zuko a position in his crew, says the prince can come along when Zhao delivers the Avatar to the Fire Lord. It's phrased as generosity but delivered as an insult. You failed, I'm succeeding, maybe you can watch from the sidelines. Zuko, predictably, tells him exactly where he can shove that offer. The language used is probably not appropriate for diplomatic relations, but then again, Zuko burned through his diplomatic skills around the same time his face got burned. Iroh tries to counsel patience, suggests that maybe working with Zhao temporarily could give them opportunities. Zuko interprets this as his uncle losing faith in him, as everyone believing he can't succeed on his own. The fight they have that night involves a lot of shouting, and at least one thrown teacup, which Iroh later notes was expensive Jasmine nephew. Show some respect for quality ceramics. The pursuit continues. Zuko tracks Team Avatar to Kyoshi Island, where he proceeds to accidentally destroy several buildings, traumatize some children, and lose a fight to a group of teenage girls in elaborate makeup and fans. The Kyoshi warriors are elite fighters with a legacy going back to Avatar Kyoshi herself, but that doesn't make losing to them any less humiliating for Zuko. He leaves the island with his dignity in tatters, and Iroh suggesting that perhaps underestimating opponents is becoming a pattern nephew. Every encounter reveals more about Aang and more about Zuko. They're mirrors in a way, both trying to live up to impossible expectations, both running from their pasts, both convinced their worth is tied to fulfilling a destiny they didn't choose. The difference is Aang has friends helping him become himself, while Zuko only has Iroh, and Zuko's not ready to listen yet. The chase leads them across the Earth Kingdom. Zuko's ship breaks down, gets repaired, breaks down again. His crew grows weary, starts questioning if this mission will ever end. Iroh perfects 17 new tea recipes and develops a comprehensive meditation routine that Zuko consistently refuses to participate in. Then everything escalates at the North Pole. Zhao launches a full-scale invasion, not just to capture the Avatar but to destroy the Northern Water Tribe entirely, break their spirit, eliminate their bending, prove the Fire Nation's dominance. It's genocide dressed up as military strategy, and Zuko watches from his small ship, horrified and also calculating. Because if Zhao captures Aang during this invasion, Zuko loses everything: his honor, his mission, his one chance to go home. So he does the only logical thing. He sneaks into the city during the attack, hunts Aang through a blizzard, and actually succeeds in capturing him while everyone else is distracted by the battle. This is Zuko at his most desperate and most dangerous. He's got Aang unconscious, slung over his shoulder, trudging through a snowstorm that would kill most people. His crew thinks he's dead. They've given up on him, started sailing home. Iroh is frantically searching the tundra, knowing his nephew is out here somewhere doing something monumentally stupid. And Zuko just keeps walking, through the storm, through the cold, through exhaustion that should have killed him hours ago. Because giving up means admitting failure, and failure means never going home. And never going home means his father was right to burn him and discard him. So he walks, and walks, and walks, until Aang wakes up, and they have a conversation that's almost surreal in its honesty. No fighting, just two people stuck in a cave, freezing, waiting for the storm to pass. Aang asks why Zuko is doing this, and for once Zuko gives a real answer. Because he needs his honor back. Because his father took everything from him, and this is the only way to get it returned. Aang, with the wisdom of someone who's lived 800 years if you count the iceberg time, points out that maybe someone who could burn their own child isn't the best person to seek validation from. Zuko doesn't want to hear it, can't process it, shuts down the conversation because the implications are too devastating to consider. The storm passes. Zuko takes Aang and starts moving again. But now the Fire Nation fleet is everywhere, searching, and Aang's friends are searching, and Iroh is searching, and everyone converges at once. Zhao finds them first, takes the avatar from Zuko, claims victory, and leaves Zuko in the snow with nothing. No avatar, no honor, no mission. Just failure and a rescue by his uncle, who's been searching all night, who tracked his nephew through a blizzard because that's what family does. Iroh holds Zuko while he falls apart, says nothing about "I told you so," or maybe we should reconsider this approach, just offers warmth and presence and the promise that they'll figure it out together. Meanwhile, Zhao proceeds to have the worst day of his life. He kills the moon spirit, actually murders one of the fundamental forces of the universe, thinking it'll win him the battle. Instead, it turns the ocean into an enemy, summons the wrath of a spirit that fuses with Aang, and results in Zhao getting dragged into the spirit world by the very forces he tried to destroy. Ironic? Absolutely. Deserved? Probably. Traumatic for everyone watching? Definitely. In the chaos, Zuko's small ship gets destroyed. Everyone assumes he died in the explosion, and for a brief moment the world moves on without him. The Northern Water Tribe celebrates their victory, Aang masters waterbending, and Team Avatar prepares to journey to the Earth Kingdom. Zuko wakes up on a different Fire Nation ship, rescued by Iroh, who somehow salvaged their lives from complete disaster. They're alive, but they have nothing. No ship, no crew, no mission. Just each other, and the growing realization that maybe chasing the Avatar across the world wasn't the answer to Zuko's problems. Maybe the problem was never about the Avatar at all. But Zuko's not ready for that revelation yet. He's spent 3 years defining himself by this mission, and letting it go means confronting the reality of his father's abuse, his sister's manipulation, and the fact that going home might not fix anything. So instead, he does what he's best at. He refuses to give up. The Avatar is heading to the Earth Kingdom to learn earthbending. Fine, Zuko will follow. No ship? They'll find one. No crew? They'll manage alone. No hope? Well, hope was always overrated anyway. Iroh watches his nephew's determination with mixed pride and despair, because this is both Zuko's greatest strength and his most dangerous flaw. The inability to quit, to admit defeat, to recognize when a battle is unwinnable. It'll either save him or destroy him, and Iroh can't tell which yet. As they prepare to leave the North Pole, travelling as refugees now instead of as prince and general, Iroh tries once more to offer guidance. Perhaps, nephew, this is an opportunity to reconsider our path, to explore what honour truly means, rather than what you've been told it means. Zuko stares at the horizon where Team Avatar disappeared hours ago, and says what he's been saying for 3 years. I have to capture the Avatar and restore my honour, but this time there's a crack in his certainty. A small doubt, barely acknowledged, that whispers dangerous questions about whether his honour was ever really lost, or if it was taken by someone who had no right to it in the first place. The hunt continues, but now they're not just chasing the Avatar across nations, they're heading toward a confrontation with truth that Zuko won't be able to run from forever. Turns out the hardest person to capture isn't a 12-year-old airbender with a flying bison. It's yourself. Stealing food from Earth Kingdom merchants is not how Prince Zuko imagined his 16th year would go, but here we are. He's crouched behind a market stall, wearing peasant clothes that smell like they've been worn by at least 3 other refugees, watching Iroh create a distraction by pretending to be a confused old man asking about tea varieties. It works, because Iroh is genuinely that passionate about tea, and the merchant gets so caught up in explaining the difference between jasmine and green that he doesn't notice Zuko pocketing bread. This is rock bottom. Also, Zuko thinks. He'll learn that rock bottom has sub-levels like some kind of terrible Earth Kingdom apartment complex. They're travelling on foot now, 2 refugees among thousands fleeing the Fire Nation's advance through the Earth Kingdom. No ship, no crew, no royal anything, just Zuko, Iroh, and whatever they can carry. Zuko's top knot is gone, cut short to blend in, which feels like losing another piece of his identity. Every time he catches his reflection in water or polished metal, he sees a stranger, scarred, desperate, ordinary. He hates it. Hates the dirt under his fingernails, the constant hunger, the way people look through him like he's nobody. Because in the Fire Nation, he was somebody. Even as a banished prince, he had a title, a mission, a ship with his name on it. Here, he's just another displaced person in a world full of them, and the anonymity burns worse than any fire. Iroh, somehow, adapts to poverty like he was born to it. He makes friends with other refugees, shares stories around campfires, finds joy in a decent cup of tea even when that tea is made from questionable leaves and river water. He treats their situation like an extended camping trip rather than the complete collapse of their former lives. Zuko treats it like the punishment it obviously is. Their days become a routine of survival. Find food, avoid Fire Nation patrols, keep moving toward wherever the Avatar might be. Zuko still thinks about his mission constantly, but now it's mixed with resentment about having to chase the Avatar while dressed like a beggar and eating stolen turnips. There's no dignity in this, no honour, just endless walking and the growing realisation that the Earth Kingdom is really, really big. Then Azula shows up and suddenly stealing vegetables seems like the good old days. She arrives with 2 friends, Mai and Ty Lee, who Zuko vaguely remembers from childhood as his sister's accessories. Now they're deadly weapons disguised as teenage girls, and they're hunting him. Not the Avatar, him specifically. Apparently Ozai has decided that Zuko and Iroh are traitors now, enemies of the Fire Nation, wanted dead or alive, but preferably dead. The news hits Zuko like a physical blow. He expected disappointment from his father. Expected continued exile, maybe some stern words about failing the mission. He did not expect to be declared a traitor, to have his own sister sent to kill him, to be cast out so completely that even the possibility of redemption is gone. Iroh takes the news with grim resignation, like he saw this coming years ago. Of course Ozai would do this. Of course showing any independence, any deviation from absolute obedience, would result in execution orders. That's just how the Fire Lord operates, even with his own children. Especially with his own children. The chase that follows is terrifying in a completely different way than chasing the Avatar. Aang runs away because he's trying to save the world and avoid getting caught. Azula hunts because she enjoys it, because bringing Zuko back, dead or alive, will earn their father's praise, and that's all she's ever wanted. They barely escape the first encounter, fleeing into the wilderness with Azula's lightning crackling behind them. Zuko learns what it's like to be the prey instead of the hunter, and the role reversal does not sit well with him. He's used to being the one doing the chasing, the one with purpose and direction. Now he's just running, reactive instead of proactive, and it feels like losing all over again. But here's where things get weird. All the stress, the lack of sleep, the poor nutrition, and the complete emotional devastation catch up to Zuko at once. He collapses with a fever that shouldn't be possible for a firebender. They run hot naturally, rarely get sick, and when they do, it's usually mild. This isn't mild. This is Zuko's body and mind staging a complete rebellion against everything he's been putting them through for the past 3 years. Iroh finds shelter in an abandoned Earth Kingdom town, barricades them in a small house, and watches his nephew burn with fever while having what can only be described as a spiritual crisis in real time. Zuko's unconscious but clearly fighting something, thrashing and crying out, reliving his worst memories on repeat. The Agni Kai with his father, the burn, the banishment, every failure to capture the Avatar, Azula's mocking laughter, his mother's face before she disappeared, the shame, the rage, the desperate need for approval that never comes. It all pours out while Zuko sweats through blankets, and Iroh applies cool compresses with the patience of someone who understands this is more than physical illness. This is Zuko's old self dying. The prince who believed honor came from his father's approval, who thought capturing the Avatar would fix everything, who tied his entire worth to accomplishing an impossible mission. That version of Zuko is burning away in this fever, leaving room for something new to emerge. The visions get weird. Zuko dreams he's two people, a blue dragon and a red dragon, fighting for control of his body. The blue dragon breathes cold fire and whispers about peace, about choosing his own path, about love without conditions. The red dragon breathes hot fire and screams about duty, honor, proving himself worthy through conquest and violence. They battle inside his mind for what feels like days, tearing him apart as they fight for dominance. Neither wins. Instead, they exhaust themselves, and in the silence that follows, Zuko hears his own voice for the first time in years. Not his father's voice, not Azula's mockery, not even Iroh's wisdom, just his own thoughts, quiet and uncertain but genuinely his. When he wakes up 3 days later, weak and disoriented, the first thing he notices is sunlight on his face. Warm, gentle, not burning. The second thing he notices is Iroh asleep in a chair beside the bed, looking older than Zuko has ever seen him, worry etched into every line. Something fundamental has shifted. Zuko can feel it, even if he can't articulate it yet. The desperate, clawing need that's driven him for 3 years has quieted. Not disappeared. He's not miraculously healed from trauma, but the volume has turned down from screaming to a manageable murmur. He sits up slowly and Iroh wakes immediately, relief flooding his face. They don't talk about the fever, about the dragons, about what just happened. Instead, Iroh makes tea, real tea this time, from a stash he's been saving, and they drink it in comfortable silence while sunlight fills the abandoned house. When they finally leave, continuing their journey through the Earth Kingdom, something is different. Zuko walks slower, notices things he would have ignored before. The way sunlight filters through leaves, children playing in a village despite the war, an old man teaching his grandson to fish, life continuing, persistent and stubborn, even in the middle of conflict. They take odd jobs to survive. Iroh's skills as a tea maker land them work in a small Earth Kingdom town shop, where Zuko is forced to interact with customers and pretend to care about their beverage preferences. He's terrible at it. His customer service face looks like he's contemplating murder, and his tea-pouring technique suggests violence against ceramics. But he tries. That's the difference. The old Zuko would have refused this work as beneath him, would have raged about wasting time when he should be hunting the Avatar. This Zuko, fresh from his fever-induced breakdown, is just tired enough to accept that survival sometimes means serving tea to Earth Kingdom peasants and pretending their complaints about water temperature are valid concerns. There's a day that stands out, burned into Zuko's memory with the clarity of a pivotal moment. They're travelling through a village that's been raided by Fire Nation soldiers, not destroyed, just terrorised enough to extract taxes and obedience. A family is trying to rebuild their home, and their young son is struggling to lift a beam that's too heavy for him. Zuko stops. Just stops walking and stares at this kid who can't be more than 10, straining against weight that won't budge, and he sees himself. Sees that desperate effort to accomplish something impossible. That refusal to admit defeat even when you're clearly outmatched. Before he can think about it, before the voice in his head that sounds like his father can tell him this is weakness, Zuko helps. Just walks over and lifts the beam into place. The kid stares at him with wide eyes, and the father thanks him with genuine gratitude that makes Zuko uncomfortable, because he's not used to people being grateful for his existence. Then the kid smiles, this huge gap-toothed smile, and says Zuko's strong, asks if he's an earthbender. And Zuko, who spent 3 years introducing himself as Prince Zuko, son of Fire Lord Ozai, heir to the throne, says no, just says he's passing through and wanted to help. Iroh watches this interaction from a distance, and when Zuko catches his eye, his uncle is smiling with something that looks like pride. Not the conditional pride that requires achievement or victory, just simple pride in his nephew doing a kind thing because it was the right thing to do. It's a small moment. probably means nothing in the grand scheme of their journey. But Zuko thinks about it for days afterward, turns it over in his mind like a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit the picture he's built of himself. They continue travelling, and Zuko starts noticing the Fire Nation's impact everywhere. Burned villages, displaced families, Earth Kingdom soldiers missing limbs from fire attacks. This isn't glorious conquest. It's cruelty on an industrial scale, and Zuko is seeing it from the victim's perspective for the first time. He doesn't know what to do with this information. Can't quite reconcile it with everything he's been taught about the Fire Nation sharing its prosperity, about bringing order to a chaotic world. The propaganda doesn't match the reality of a mother crying over her burned home, of children flinching at the sight of fire. Iroh doesn't push these observations, doesn't force Zuko to confront the implications. He just lets his nephew see things clearly for the first time, trusting that wisdom can't be taught, only earned through experience. One evening they're camped under stars and Iroh tells Zuko about his son, about Lu Ten, who died at Ba Sing Se during Iroh's siege, and how that loss broke something fundamental in Iroh's understanding of the world. How he realised that conquest comes at a cost paid by both sides, that victory means nothing when you've sacrificed everything meaningful to achieve it. Zuko listens without interrupting, which is growth in itself. The old Zuko would have gotten defensive, would have argued about duty and honour and the greater good. This Zuko just listens and tries to understand why his uncle left behind a military career, why he volunteers to follow his banished nephew into exile, why he makes tea instead of making war. The answer is love. Simple, uncomplicated love that doesn't require achievement or worthiness. Iroh loves Zuko not because of who he might become or what he might accomplish, but because he's family. Because after losing Lu Ten, Iroh decided that protecting Zuko's humanity was more important than any military victory. It's the most radical thing Zuko has ever encountered. Love without conditions. He doesn't know what to do with it, how to accept it, whether he deserves it. So he just sits there, staring at the fire, and lets the concept wash over him like rain on desert sand. Days blur together. They work odd jobs, avoid Fire Nation patrols, hear rumours about the Avatar heading toward Omashu. Zuko's first instinct is to chase after Aang to resume his mission, but the urgency has faded. The fever burned away his desperation and left behind something quieter but more sustainable. Determination without self-destruction. They encounter more refugees, more people displaced by the war. Iroh helps where he can, sharing food when they have extra, telling stories to children who've seen too much violence. Zuko participates reluctantly at first, then with something approaching acceptance. There's a moment when they're helping an elderly woman carry supplies to the next village, and she asks Zuko where he's from. He hesitates, because the truth is complicated and dangerous. Finally, he says he's from the Fire Nation, watches her face close off and adds that he's trying to be better than where he came from. She studies him for a long moment, taking in his scar, his awkward sincerity, and says that's all anyone can do. Be better than their worst inheritance. It's not forgiveness, not acceptance, just acknowledgement that people can change if they choose to, even if that choice comes with difficulty and doubt. Zuko thinks about that conversation for weeks, turns it over alongside the memory of the kid smiling at him, the fever dreams of dragons, Iroh's stories about Lu Ten. He's building something new inside himself piece by piece, though he doesn't have words for what it is yet. One night, lying under stars in the Earth Kingdom wilderness, Zuko asks Iroh if he thinks people can change. If someone who's done terrible things can become good, or if your past defines you forever. Iroh considers this seriously, because he never dismisses Zuko's questions no matter how they're phrased. Finally, he says that everyone has the power to change their own destiny, to choose who they want to be. The past shapes you, but it doesn't have to control you. You decide what kind of person to become, one choice at a time. Then he adds, with characteristic wisdom disguised as simplicity, that of course people can change. After all, tea is nothing but hot leaf juice until you decide how to brew it. The leaves don't determine the quality, the care and attention do. Zuko points out that this metaphor doesn't really work, that tea leaves absolutely affect the flavour. Iroh beams and says his nephew is learning to think critically, even about tea analogies, which is excellent progress. Despite everything, the poverty, the danger, the complete collapse of his former life, Zuko almost laughs. It's a small sound. Rusty with disuse, but it's genuine. For the first time in years, he feels something other than anger or desperation. He feels almost peaceful. It won't last. Peace never does when your homicidal sister is hunting you and the Avatar is somewhere learning to throw rocks. But in this moment, sitting by a fire with his uncle under Earth Kingdom stars, Zuko experiences something he hasn't felt since before his banishment. Contentment with simply existing, without needing to prove anything to anyone. The journey continues. More villages, more odd jobs, more careful avoidance of both Fire Nation troops and anyone who might recognize them. Zuko helps people sometimes, small things, carrying supplies, fixing broken carts with his surprising mechanical skills. He doesn't make a big deal of it, doesn't expect gratitude. He just does it because the alternative is walking past suffering when he has the ability to help. Iroh notices but says nothing, understanding that Zuko needs to discover his own capacity for goodness without someone narrating it like a proud parent at a child's recital. Then they hear about a town with good tea shops and better opportunities for work, a massive city that refugees flock to because it's never fallen to the Fire Nation, a place of walls and secrets and second chances, Ba Sing Se. Iroh's face lights up at the name. He's always wanted to see the city again, under better circumstances than a military siege. Zuko is less enthusiastic because big cities mean crowds and scrutiny and more chances to be recognized. But they're running out of options. Azula is still hunting them, Fire Nation patrols are everywhere, and at some point you have to stop running and start living, even if that life is built on new identities in a city that Iroh once tried to conquer. As they join the flow of refugees heading toward Ba Sing Se's massive walls, Zuko looks back one last time at the wilderness they're leaving behind. Out there he was nobody, just another scarred refugee trying to survive. It was hard and humiliating and completely stripped of dignity. It was also the first time in his life he got to choose who he wanted to be, without his father's voice dictating every decision. The fever broke more than his body's defences. It broke the chains he didn't know he was wearing, gave him the space to breathe and think and question everything he'd been taught about honour and duty and worth. He's not healed, not even close, but he's different. Softer in some ways, though he'd never admit it. More willing to sit with uncertainty instead of demanding immediate answers. For a moment, Zuko almost found peace. Almost found a new path. But destiny, or in this case, a circus, a drill, and his sister, had other plans. Ba Sing Se is enormous in a way that makes you reconsider what the word enormous actually means. The outer wall stretches so far in both directions that you can't see where it ends, massive and ancient and utterly impassable unless you're invited in, which is exactly the problem for two Fire Nation refugees pretending to be Earth Kingdom citizens, getting past the scrutiny of guards who've been fighting this war for a century. Zuko and Iroh join the endless line of refugees waiting for processing, surrounded by families who've lost everything, soldiers who've lost limbs, children who've lost parents. The suffering is palpable, pressing in from all sides, and Zuko realizes with uncomfortable clarity that the Fire Nation did this. His nation, his father, him, by extension, because he spent 3 years trying to help them win. The thought sits heavy in his chest as they shuffle forward in line, watching Earth Kingdom officials decide who gets to enter the city and who gets sent away. Papers are checked, stories are verified, suspicions are raised and dismissed. Zuko keeps his head down, trying to look like just another traumatized refugee instead of a banished Fire Nation prince with a very recognizable scar. They make it through. Barely. The official processing them looks at Zuko's scar with questions clearly forming, but Iroh spins a story about a farming accident involving a plough and remarkably bad luck, and somehow it's convincing enough. Or maybe the official is just tired of asking questions that don't change anything. Let in or turn away. Either choice means someone's suffering. Inside the walls, Ba Sing Se is a city of layers. The outer ring where refugees are dumped is overcrowded and poor, buildings stacked on top of each other like someone played Tetris with architecture and gave up halfway through. The middle ring is better, merchants and artisans, people with enough money to not worry about daily survival, but not enough to pretend the war doesn't exist. The upper ring is where the wealthy live, isolated and pristine, convinced that as long as the walls hold, Nothing bad can touch them. Zuko and Iroh start in the outer ring, because that's where refugees belong according to Ba Sing Se's strict social hierarchy. They find work at a tea shop run by a man who asks no questions as long as they show up on time and don't steal from the register. The pay is terrible, the hours are worse, and Zuko's job description appears to be serving tea while radiating barely contained hostility toward customers. He's spectacularly bad at it. Every interaction is painful. Customers ask for recommendations, and Zuko suggests they just pick something and stop wasting his time. They complain their tea is too hot, and Zuko points out that hot is literally the defining characteristic of tea. They try to make small talk, and Zuko stares at them with the social grace of someone who spent his formative years on a warship hunting a myth. Iroh naturally is beloved immediately. He remembers regular customers' names, asks about their families, makes personalised tea blends based on their preferences. Within a week, people are coming specifically to talk to the friendly old man who makes excellent jasmine tea and gives unsolicited but surprisingly helpful life advice. Zuko watches his uncle thrive in this environment and can't decide if he's proud or resentful. Probably both. Iroh is genuinely happy serving tea in a cramped shop in the outer ring of Ba Sing Se, and Zuko can't understand how someone who was once a general, who commanded armies and sieged cities, can find satisfaction in measuring tea leaves and chatting with strangers. But Iroh does. He's chosen this life, this simplicity, this daily practice of small kindnesses, and he's trying to show Zuko that there's dignity in honest work, that you don't need royal titles or military conquest to live a meaningful life. Zuko is not convinced. He goes through the motions, pours tea, collects coins, and counts days like a prisoner marking time until something changes. Then Jet shows up, and things get complicated in the specific way that involves swords and accusations and the very real possibility of execution. Jet recognizes them. Not immediately. Zuko's haircut and peasant clothes are a decent disguise, and Iroh without his armour looks like any other kindly old man. But Jet is paranoid in the way that comes from watching the Fire Nation burn your village, from losing everything to an enemy you can identify by their eyes and their stance and the way they hold themselves. He sees through the disguise. Watches Zuko move, notices the controlled aggression in his posture, the way he generates heat when he's angry. Firebender, Fire Nation, enemy. Jet doesn't just confront them. He builds a case, gathers evidence, plans to expose them to Ba Sing Se authorities, because in this city being Fire Nation is a death sentence or at least a very enthusiastic imprisonment. The Dai Li don't mess around when it comes to potential spies. The confrontation happens in an alley, which is never a good sign for how a conversation will go. Jet accuses Zuko of being Fire Nation. Zuko denies it with the sincerity of someone who's technically telling the truth from a certain perspective. He's not Fire Nation anymore. He's banished, which is different. Jet doesn't care about the nuance, he attacks. The fight is brutal and desperate. Zuko can't use firebending without proving Jet right, so it's just swords and martial arts and years of training colliding in the shadows. They're evenly matched in the worst way, skilled enough to hurt each other seriously, but not skilled enough to end it quickly. Iroh tries to intervene, to talk Jet down, to explain that yes, they're from the Fire Nation, but no, they're not here to hurt anyone. Jet, reasonably, points out that trusting Fire Nation refugees is exactly how Ba Sing Se would fall from the inside. The Dai Li arrive before anyone dies, which is either very fortunate or very unfortunate depending on your perspective. They arrest everyone involved, Jet for disturbing the peace, Zuko and Iroh for being suspicious. In the chaos of interrogation and accusations, something strange happens. The Dai Li believe Zuko and Iroh. Or rather, they choose to believe them, despite Jet's evidence, despite the obvious signs that something doesn't add up. They release the two Earth Kingdom refugees and keep Jet for processing, which in Ba Sing Se terms means brainwashing him into forgetting this ever happened. Zuko walks away from that interrogation deeply unsettled. They should have been caught. They should be in prison or worse. Instead, the Dai Li just let them go with a warning to be more careful about who they associate with. Later, much later, Zuko will understand that the Dai Li knew exactly who they were and let them go anyway because refugees from the Fire Nation aren't a threat, they're leverage, potential assets, tools to be used if needed and discarded if not. But in the moment, he just feels lucky and guilty about Jet, who was right about everything and got punished for it while Zuko and Iroh walked free. The injustice of it gnaws at him. Another piece of evidence that the world is more complicated than good versus evil. Fire Nation versus everyone else. Life continues. They keep working at the tea shop, keep their heads down, keep pretending to be Earth Kingdom citizens named Lee and Mushi, because apparently those are the most generic names Iroh could think of on short notice. Zuko points out that Lee is also a Fire Nation name. Iroh says that's what makes it clever, hiding in plain sight. Then something unexpected happens. A girl asks Zuko out. Her name is Jin, and she's a customer at the shop who's been coming in regularly, making conversation, and apparently interpreting Zuko's awkward discomfort as mysterious rather than antisocial. She asks him to dinner with the kind of straightforward confidence that suggests she has no idea who she's asking out. Zuko, panicking, says yes before his brain can properly process what's happening. Iroh is delighted, thrilled, acts like Zuko just won a major military victory instead of agreeing to have dinner with a nice girl. He gives advice about flowers and compliments and how to smile without looking like you're plotting violence. Zuko absorbs approximately none of this information and shows up to the date with the social skills of someone who was homeschooled on a warship by an uncle and a crew of soldiers. The date is simultaneously sweet and painful to watch. Jin tries to make conversation, asks about Zuko's scar with genuine curiosity rather than horror. Zuko, for possibly the first time in his life, tells a version of the truth that isn't wrapped in shame. It happened in a duel. Someone who was supposed to care about him hurt him instead, and he's still figuring out how to live with that. Jin doesn't press for details, just says that scars mean you survived something difficult, which makes them kind of beautiful in their own way. And Zuko, who spent 3 years hating his scar as a mark of failure and dishonour, briefly considers that maybe it's also proof of survival. Proof that he endured something that should have broken him and came out the other side. They walk through Ba Sing Se at night, and Jin shows him her favourite spot, a fountain with lanterns that create beautiful reflections in the water. It's romantic in a way that makes Zuko deeply uncomfortable because he's not used to nice things happening without hidden costs. When Jin closes her eyes and asks him to light the lanterns, he hesitates for a long moment before using his firebending to create a gentle flame that brings the fountain to life. She opens her eyes to beauty and magic, and she's smiling at him like he's someone worth smiling at. Not a prince, not a mission, not a weapon, just a person who can make light in darkness. They kiss. It's gentle and sweet and absolutely nothing like the aggressive intensity that defines most of Zuko's life. For a moment he gets to be a normal teenage boy on a date with a girl who likes him for who he is, not who he's supposed to be. That moment is one of the saddest in Zuko's entire story, because it represents everything he could have if he could just let go. If he could accept this simple life, this uncomplicated affection, this possibility of being Lee the tea shop worker instead of Zuko the banished prince, but he can't. He's not ready. The date ends, Jin thanks him for a wonderful evening, and Zuko walks home knowing he's going to break her heart. Not intentionally, not cruelly, just by being who he is, by carrying a mission he can't abandon and an identity he can't escape. Iroh asks how it went. Zuko says it was fine, doesn't elaborate, and they both pretend this is normal teenage date behaviour instead of Zuko processing the complicated grief of glimpsing a life he can't have. Meanwhile, Iroh's tea skills are attracting attention. The shop owner promotes them to better positions, gives Iroh more freedom to experiment with blends. Word spreads about the old man in the outer ring who makes the best tea in Ba Sing Se, and eventually that word reaches people with money and influence. A wealthy merchant offers to set Iroh up with his own shop in the upper ring. Real resources, proper equipment, a chance to practice his craft without the constraints of poverty. Iroh accepts with the enthusiasm of someone who's found his true calling after decades of searching. Zuko watches his uncle thrive and feels the walls of their new life closing in. This isn't temporary anymore. Iroh isn't just hiding time until they can resume hunting the Avatar. He's building a genuine life here, planting roots, creating something permanent. The tea shop in the upper ring is called the Jasmine Dragon, and it's beautiful, elegant, successful. Customers from all over Ba Sing Se come to taste Iroh's legendary tea, and Iroh greets each one like an honoured guest. He's genuinely happy, maybe the happiest Zuko has ever seen him, and Zuko feels like he's drowning. Because if this is happiness, if this is what a good life looks like, then what was everything before? What were those 3 years of hunting the Avatar if the answer was just to give up, serve tea, and pretend to be someone else? He starts taking long walks through the city, restless and uncertain. Sometimes he ends up in the middle ring, watching refugees arrive with the same desperation he felt months ago. Sometimes he finds himself near the outer wall, staring at the barrier between Ba Sing Se and the rest of the world, wondering what's happening beyond it. The Avatar is out there somewhere, probably learning earthbending, definitely getting closer to being ready to face the Fire Lord. And Zuko is here, serving tea and pretending his name is Lee. The cognitive dissonance is tearing him apart. He's more comfortable than he's been in years. Better fed, better rested, safer than he's been since childhood. And he's absolutely miserable, because comfort without purpose feels like giving up. Iroh notices but doesn't push, just continues being patient, continues showing Zuko that there are many kinds of honour, many ways to live a meaningful life. He's trying to teach his nephew that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go of revenge and choose peace instead. Zuko is not ready to learn this lesson, not yet. Then Azula arrives in Ba Sing Se, and suddenly letting go becomes impossible. She's not alone. Mai and Ty Lee are with her, along with a plan that's been months in the making. They're not here to capture Zuko. That's just a side mission. They're here to conquer Ba Sing Se from within, to hand the city to the Fire Nation without breaking a single wall, to prove that Azula is more effective than any general, any army, any brute force strategy. They infiltrate the Dai Li, manipulate Long Feng, turn Ba Sing Se's own secret police into Fire Nation assets. It's brilliant and terrifying and exactly the kind of thing Azula excels at. Psychological warfare disguised as political maneuvering. Zuko doesn't know any of this is happening until it's too late. Until the city is already compromised and his peaceful interlude is about to shatter spectacularly. But before that, there's the Crystal Catacombs, the moment that defines everything that comes after. The choice that Zuko will spend the next several months regretting with every fibre of his being. Team Avatar is in Ba Sing Se, though Zuko doesn't know it yet. They're here to warn the Earth King about a solar eclipse, to build an invasion force, to finally take the fight to the Fire Nation. And through a series of events involving the Dai Li's machinations and Azula's schemes, various members of both Team Avatar and Zuko's remnant family end up imprisoned in crystal catacombs beneath the city. Zuko finds himself locked in with Katara. Just the two of them, trapped underground, forced to actually talk instead of fighting. The conversation starts hostile. Katara hates him, and she's got every right to. He's chased them across the world, attacked her friends, represents everything the Fire Nation has done to her people. The fact that he's technically a refugee now doesn't erase months of him being their enemy. But in the stillness of the cave, with no audience and no immediate danger, they start talking. Really talking. And Zuko does something he rarely does. He listens. Katara tells him about her mother, about the Fire Nation raid that took her life, about growing up too fast because someone had to take care of everyone, about the weight of being strong when all you want is to fall apart. And Zuko, recognizing grief in someone else, tells her about his mother, about Ursa's disappearance, about never knowing if she left because she wanted to, or if she was forced away, about growing up with Azula and Ozai as his only family, and how that shaped him into someone his mother probably wouldn't recognize. They find common ground in loss, in absent mothers and childhood stolen by war. Katara sees past the scar and the hostility to the hurt underneath, and for a moment she considers that maybe people can change. That maybe Zuko isn't just an enemy. Maybe he's another victim of the Fire Nation's cruelty, damaged in different ways than her, but damaged nonetheless. She offers to heal his scar with spirit water from the North Pole, water that has genuine healing properties. Reaches toward his face with gentle intention, and Zuko lets her. Allows himself to be vulnerable, to accept care from someone who has every reason to hate him. They almost connect, almost find common ground, almost start building something that could bridge the gap between their nations and their pain. Then Iroh and Aang break into the catacombs, and everything accelerates toward disaster. Azula appears with Dai Li agents, and suddenly the catacombs are a battleground. Aang and Katara on one side, Azula and her forces on the other, and Zuko in the middle, literally and figuratively. Iroh pleads with him, begs him to choose the right path, to stand with the Avatar against his sister, to be the person Iroh knows he can become. This is it, the moment of choice, the chance to step away from the Fire Nation's brutality and towards something better. Azula offers him an alternative. Come home. Be a prince again. Their father will accept him back, she says. All is forgiven. The Avatar is here, they can capture him together, and Zuko can have everything he thought he wanted. For a long moment, Zuko stands frozen between these two futures. On one side, Iroh's love and Team Avatar's potential acceptance, but uncertainty, exile, poverty. On the other, his father's approval, his title restored, going home, but aligning with Azula's cruelty and abandoning everything he's learned about the Fire Nation's true nature. He looks at Katara, who's watching him with something that might be hope. Looks at Iroh, whose face shows heartbreak because his uncle already knows what Zuko is about to choose. Looks at Azula, who's smiling because she knows she's won. Zuko chooses Azula, chooses the Fire Nation, chooses to go home. He attacks Aang alongside his sister, combining their fire-bending in devastating strikes. Azula's lightning catches Aang in the back just as he enters the Avatar state, and for a terrible moment it seems like they've killed the Avatar. Like Zuko has just helped murder a 12-year-old to win his father's approval. Katara catches Aang's body as he falls, uses the spirit water to bring him back from the edge of death, and escapes with Toph's help. They flee, and Zuko is left standing in the ruins with Azula, who's thrilled with their victory. Iroh looks at Zuko with disappointment so profound it physically hurts. Doesn't say anything, doesn't need to. Just looks at his nephew with the weight of broken trust, and then turns away. That look will haunt Zuko for months, but in the moment he pushes it aside, buries it deep, and tells himself he made the right choice. Ba Sing Se falls. The Earth Kingdom's greatest city, unconquered for 100 years, surrenders to the Fire Nation without a battle. Azula did what countless generals couldn't, and she's bringing Zuko home as part of her victory. They return to the Fire Nation as heroes, Azula as the brilliant strategist who delivered Ba Sing Se, Zuko as the prince who helped defeat the Avatar. Ozai welcomes them with praise and restored honour. Zuko gets his title back, his place at court, his father's approval. He got everything he thought he wanted. The throne room welcomed him. His father acknowledged him. He was home. So why did it feel like he'd lost everything that actually mattered? The Fire Nation Palace is exactly as Zuko remembers it. Oppressive, pristine, and gilded with the kind of wealth that comes from a century of conquest. Every surface gleams, every corridor echoes with the footsteps of servants who've mastered the art of being invisible, and the air itself seems to carry the weight of expectations that crush you before you even realise they're there. Zuko has his own chambers again. Not the small room he had as a child, but proper royal apartments befitting a prince who helped conquer Ba Sing Se. The bed is enormous, the view overlooks the capital, and there are servants whose entire job is to make sure he's comfortable. It's everything a teenage prince could want. He can't sleep in it. Not properly. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees the catacombs, sees Katara's face right before he betrayed her trust, sees Iroh's disappointment, sees Aang falling, lightning struck, possibly dead because of Zuko's choice. The nightmares are relentless and specific. Sometimes he's back in the Agni Kai with his father, but this time when he looks up, it's Iroh standing over him, flame in hand, asking why Zuko threw away everything they'd built together. Sometimes he's serving tea in Ba Sing Se and Jin walks in, recognizes him as Fire Nation royalty, and her smile transforms into horror and betrayal. The worst ones involve Aang. In these dreams, the Avatar didn't survive. Katara couldn't heal him, and Zuko watches the light go out of a 12-year-old's eyes while the world ends around them. No Avatar means no balance, no hope, just the Fire Nation consuming everything until there's nothing left but ash and regret. He wakes up gasping, sweating despite being a firebender, and stares at silk sheets that cost more than most Earth Kingdom families earn in a year. Then he gets up, washes his face in a golden basin, and puts on the mask of Prince Zuko, returned hero, son who finally made his father proud. The mask is suffocating, but he wears it anyway because taking it off means confronting what he's done. His father summons him regularly now, not for affection or genuine conversation. Ozai doesn't do those things. but for reports, strategy sessions, reminders that Zuko's position is conditional on continued success. The message is clear: you're back because you proved useful, and you'll stay as long as you remain useful. Zuko sits through these meetings and nods at appropriate times, offers tactical suggestions based on his 3 years travelling the world, and watches his father treat him like a functional tool instead of a son. It's exactly what he thought he wanted. Acknowledgement, inclusion, proof that he has value. It feels hollow. Empty in a way that makes those months as a refugee in the Earth Kingdom seem almost precious by comparison. At least when he was stealing vegetables and serving tea, he wasn't complicit in planning the next wave of conquest and destruction. Azula naturally thrives in this environment. She's Fire Lord Ozai's perfect weapon, brilliant and ruthless and completely convinced that power equals love. She watches Zuko with the calculating interest of a cat studying something it might eat later, waiting for him to slip up to prove he's still the weak, banished brother she remembers. Their interactions are poisonous. Every conversation is a chess match where showing vulnerability means losing, and losing means becoming a target. Azula makes subtle comments about how Zuko seems distracted, how he's not quite living up to expectations, how father has noticed certain hesitations in his demeanour. Zuko can't tell if she's genuinely concerned in her twisted way, or if she's planting seeds of doubt in their father's mind. Probably both. Azula is excellent at multitasking when it comes to psychological warfare. Then there's Mai. She was waiting for him when he returned, which should have been romantic but felt more like another obligation clicking into place. They were childhood friends, sort of dated before his banishment, and now they're picking up where they left off because that's what Fire Nation nobility does. Reconnect, marry strategically, produce heirs who'll continue the cycle. Mai is genuinely happy he's back, in her understated, emotionally repressed way. She smiles, barely, but for Mai that's basically a parade of excitement, and holds his hand in public, which is the Fire Nation equivalent of a declaration of undying love. Zuko tries to reciprocate. He does care about Mai. She's smart, capable, sees through social pretenses in ways he appreciates. When they're together, there are moments of genuine connection, conversations where neither of them has to perform for an audience, but there's a distance he can't bridge. Mai wants the prince, the title, the fairy tale ending where they live in the palace and everything is perfect. She doesn't want to hear about tea shops in Bussing Sea, or the ethical implications of the Fire Nation's conquest, or the nightmares that wake him up at 3 a.m. She's not interested in the person Zuko was becoming during those months as a refugee. She wants the Zuko she remembers from childhood, confident, royal, uncomplicated by things like empathy for the Fire Nation's victims. The disconnect grows every day, and Zuko doesn't know how to fix it without explaining the darkness sitting in his chest like a stone. So he just goes through the motions, dates, public appearances, playing the role of prince and princess while feeling like an actor who forgot his lines. Ozai decides his children need a break from palace life, not out of concern for their well-being, but because even weapons need maintenance. He sends Zuko, Azula, Mai and Ty Lee to Ember Island, the royal family's beach house, for what's supposed to be a relaxing vacation. It is not relaxing. It is the exact opposite of relaxing. Ember Island represents everything wrong with Fire Nation nobility: excessive wealth, willful ignorance of the war, entertainment built on sanitized versions of real suffering. There's a theatre that performs plays about the war, reducing genocide and conquest to comedy and dramatic romance. People laugh at caricatures of the Avatar and his friends, cheer for Fire Nation victory, and never once consider the actual human cost. Zuko watches one of these plays and feels physically ill. They portray him as an angry, scar-obsessed villain who can't stop yelling about honour. It's satirical, meant to be funny, and the audience loves it. Azula laughs. Mai squeezes his hand like she thinks he needs comfort about being mocked. He walks out before the second act, stands outside the theatre, staring at the ocean, and wonders if this is what his life is now, watching people turn suffering into entertainment while pretending everything is fine. The beach day that follows is somehow worse. They attempt normal teenage activities: volleyball, swimming, socialising with other Fire Nation youth who've never experienced hardship or consequences. Azula dominates every interaction through sheer force of personality and intimidation. Mai is bored by everything. Ty Lee is aggressively cheerful in a way that feels like performance, and Zuko is angry. Not the hot, explosive anger he's carried for years. That's been replaced by something colder, deeper, more existential. He's angry at himself, at his father, at the entire system that created this world where people can vacation on beaches while other nations burn. They light a bonfire that night because apparently that's what teenagers do on beaches. The fire reflects off the water, creating patterns that would be beautiful if Zuko could appreciate beauty anymore. Someone suggests sharing feelings, being vulnerable, actually talking to each other like human beings instead of Fire Nation automatons. Azula goes first, spinning a story about a betrayal that's technically true, but carefully edited to make her seem like the victim. Ty Lee talks about her childhood, about being one of 6 identical sisters and needing to stand out, about joining a circus to have an identity separate from her family. Mai discusses her upbringing, her parents' expectations, the suffocating boredom of Fire Nation nobility where everything is predetermined and passion is considered vulgar. Then it's Zuko's turn and something breaks. The mask cracks. 3 months of repressing everything, of pretending he's fine, of acting like returning to the Fire Nation solved his problems instead of creating new ones. It all comes pouring out. He talks about the Agni Kai, about his father burning him for showing compassion, for daring to suggest that Fire Nation soldiers' lives had value. About 3 years of exile, chasing the Avatar, desperate for approval from someone who was never going to give it. About Uncle Iroh's love and how Zuko threw it away for nothing. He talks about Ba Sing Se, about serving tea and being nobody and almost finding peace, about choosing to come home and how it felt like winning but tastes like ashes. And then he says it, the thing he's been avoiding since the night he returned. My own mother thought I was a monster. She was right, but it still hurt. The silence that follows is deafening. Azula looks genuinely uncomfortable, which might be a first. Mai doesn't know what to say to this level of vulnerability. Ty Lee offers sympathy that's sincere but can't fix anything. Zuko stands up, walks away from the fire and screams at the ocean. Just screams, letting out months of frustration and regret and rage at himself and his choices. It's cathartic and useless in equal measure. The ocean doesn't care. His problems don't disappear, but at least he's acknowledged they exist. When they return to the capital, Zuko does something brave or stupid, depending on perspective. He confronts Ozai about Ursa, about his mother's disappearance, about what really happened the night she vanished, about whether she left because she wanted to, or because she was protecting her children from something worse. Ozai stares at him, with the cold calculation of someone deciding whether crushing this question is worth the effort. Finally, he says that Ursa made a choice, that she was banished for treason, that Zuko would do well not to follow in her footsteps by questioning things above his station. It's not an answer. It's a threat disguised as information, a reminder that even here, even back in the palace, Zuko's position is precarious. One wrong move, one sign of the weakness that got him exiled the first time, and he'll be cast out again, or worse. But Zuko also notices something else in his father's response. Ozai doesn't want to talk about Ursa. There's discomfort there, maybe even guilt, though Fire Lords probably don't experience guilt the way normal humans do. Whatever happened to Zuko's mother, it's connected to Ozai in ways that make the Fire Lord uncomfortable. This conversation plants a seed, a small rebellion in the form of asking questions, demanding answers, refusing to accept the official story. Zuko doesn't know what to do with this seed yet, but it's growing, putting down roots in the foundation of his loyalty to the Fire Nation. Then comes the War Council meeting that changes everything. Ozai summons his children and generals to discuss final preparations for Sozon's comet, the cosmic event that'll supercharge every firebender on the planet. This is it. The moment the Fire Nation has been building toward for 100 years, the chance to win the war decisively and permanently. The generals discuss strategy with the casual efficiency of men who've spent their lives orchestrating violence. They talk about troop movements and supply lines, and which Earth Kingdom cities to burn first when the comet arrives. Then someone suggests a new tactic. The Earth Kingdom is resilient because of its people, because even after cities fall, there are always more communities to rebuild, more resistance fighters to oppose Fire Nation control. So why not eliminate the problem at its source? Why not use the power of the comet to burn the entire Earth Kingdom to the ground, kill everyone who might resist and start fresh with Fire Nation colonies? Genocide. They're proposing genocide, systematic and complete, using the comet's power to accomplish what 100 years of war hasn't, and they're discussing it like it's a reasonable military strategy, like the mass murder of an entire nation is just another tactical decision. Zuko sits in this meeting listening to his father and these generals plan to murder millions of people, and he realizes with horrifying clarity what he's returned to. This isn't honor. This isn't restoring balance or sharing prosperity. This is extermination dressed up in military language, and he's sitting at the table complicit by proximity. He remembers the Earth Kingdom refugees he met during his exile. The family he helped rebuild their home, the Earth Kingdom soldiers who showed him mercy when they could have killed him. Jin, who saw past his scar and his nationality to the person underneath. The Fire Nation is planning to burn all of them, systematically, efficiently, using power that should be sacred to commit atrocity on a scale that makes previous war crimes look like practice. Ozai looks at Zuko during this discussion, gauging his reaction, testing whether his son has the stomach for what's necessary. Azula sits perfectly composed, nodding along with the logic because this is what she's been raised to accept. That power justifies anything, that other nations are obstacles to be removed rather than people with the right to exist. Zuko keeps his face neutral, nods at appropriate moments, and feels something fundamental shift inside him. This is the line. This is where he can't pretend anymore, can't tell himself he made the right choice, can't believe that honor and obedience are the same thing. That night, the nightmares intensify. He dreams he's standing in the Fire Lord's throne room while the Earth Kingdom burns. People scream in the distance, but the palace is insulated, protected, pristine. Aang appears, asking why Zuko didn't stop this, why he chose his father over what's right. Then the dream shifts, and Iroh is there, not angry, but profoundly sad. He's holding a cup of tea, offering it to Zuko, and when Zuko reaches for it, his hands are covered in blood that won't wash away no matter how hard he scrubs. He wakes up gasping, realizes he's been crying in his sleep and has to face a terrible truth. Getting everything he thought he wanted is worse than losing everything. At least in exile, he could tell himself he was trying to do the right thing, trying to restore his honor through legitimate means. Here, in the palace, with his title restored and his father's approval, he's just another weapon in Ozai's arsenal, another tool for conquest and destruction. And the worst part is he chose this. Walked away from Iroh's love and a chance at redemption, because he was too scared to let go of a life that was destroying him from the inside. Mai notices something's wrong but doesn't know how to help. She suggests they spend more time together, that maybe he's just adjusting to palace life after years away. She doesn't understand that the problem isn't adjustment, it's that Zuko finally sees clearly what he's been trained not to see his entire life. The Fire Nation is the villain in this story. Not a complicated, morally grey political entity, but genuinely, unambiguously evil, and he's part of it, complicit in it, contributing to it with every day he stays silent. Azula watches him unravel with interest. She knows something has shifted in her brother, some weakness has reasserted itself, and she's waiting to see how it manifests. Will he crack publicly? Will he embarrass their father again? Will he give her an excuse to eliminate him as competition? She doesn't have to wait long for answers because Zuko's breaking point is approaching fast. Every day in the palace is another day of pretending, performing, dying inside while wearing a crown he thought he wanted. The irony would be funny if it wasn't devastating. Zuko spent 3 years in exile, desperate to come home, and now that he's here, all he wants is to leave, to find Iroh and apologize, to warn the Avatar about what's coming, to do something, anything, that doesn't involve sitting in this golden prison while the world burns. But leaving means admitting he was wrong, means facing his father's rage, Azula's triumph, Mai's disappointment, means becoming a traitor for real this time, not just in name but in action, means accepting that honor was never about obedience or approval. It was about integrity, about being able to live with yourself, about choosing what's right even when it costs everything. One morning, Zuko stands on his balcony overlooking the capital, watching the sun rise over the Fire Nation, and makes a decision. He doesn't know exactly what he's going to do yet, doesn't have a plan or strategy or clear path forward, but he knows he can't stay here. Can't watch his father genocide an entire nation. Can't pretend he didn't learn anything during those months as a refugee, didn't see the humanity in people he was taught to consider enemies. The scar on his face throbs like it always does when he's stressed, a permanent reminder of the cost of defying his father. Last time, speaking out earned him burns and banishment. This time, the stakes are higher. Treason is punishable by death, and Ozai has already proven he's willing to hurt his own children. But staying silent, staying complicit, letting this genocide happen without even trying to stop it, that's a scar Zuko won't survive. That's the kind of damage that destroys who you are at a fundamental level, turns you into exactly the monster his mother feared he'd become. So he starts planning, quietly, carefully, telling no one because trust is a luxury he can't afford. He needs information about when the comet will arrive, what Ozai's exact plans are, where the Avatar is hiding. He needs to figure out how to get a message to Iroh, assuming his uncle will even speak to him after what happened in Ba Sing Se. Most importantly, he needs to figure out how to escape the palace without getting caught, because once he leaves, there's no coming back. This time, exile will be permanent. This time, he'll be a traitor in truth, hunted by his own nation, burned from the family tree like his mother before him. Getting everything you want is easy. Living with yourself afterward, that's the hard part. And Zuko was about to make the hardest choice of his life. Again. This time, though, he's not choosing based on fear or desperation or the need for approval. He's choosing based on something much simpler and infinitely more terrifying. The difference between right and wrong, even when right means losing everything you thought defined you. The palace that was supposed to feel like home feels like a tomb. Every gilded surface is a reminder of whose blood paid for this luxury. Every servant bowing is another person trapped in a system that grinds humanity into dust. Every meal served on gold plates tastes like ashes because Zuko finally understands the cost. He's going to leave, going to betray his nation, his father, everything he was taught to value. Going to throw away his second chance at being a prince because being a prince means enabling genocide, and that's not a price his conscience can pay anymore. Mai will hate him. Azula will hunt him. Ozai will probably send assassins, and Iroh might not forgive him, might not believe his change of heart is genuine after Zuko betrayed him so completely in Ba Sing Se. But none of that matters as much as the simple truth burning in Zuko's chest. He can't be the person his father wants him to be without destroying who he actually is underneath the title, and the expectations and the fear. So he's going to choose himself, choose integrity over approval. Choose a harder path because the easy one leads directly to becoming everything he's spent months learning to hate. The decision is made. Now he just needs to figure out how to survive it. The nightmares are getting worse, not more frequent. They're already every night, but more specific, more vivid, more like prophecies than dreams. Zuko sees himself standing in the throne room while the world burns outside. Sees his father's face twisted in satisfaction as the Earth Kingdom turns to ash. Sees Aang falling over and over, lightning struck, while Zuko does nothing to stop it. The worst one involves Iroh. In the dream, his uncle is serving tea in some peaceful afterlife, surrounded by people Zuko recognizes from their time as refugees. The family whose house they helped rebuild. Jin with her kind smile. Earth Kingdom soldiers who showed them mercy. They're all drinking tea together, laughing, at peace. Zuko tries to join them, but when Iroh sees him, the old man's face closes off, shakes his head slowly, sadly, and turns away. The message is clear. You made your choice, and this is not where that choice leads. He wakes up with tears on his face and a decision crystallizing in his mind. The day of black sun is coming, a solar eclipse that'll block firebending for 8 minutes, give or take. The invasion force that Sokka and his father have been planning will attack during that window. Try to end the war by capturing Ozai when he's powerless. They're going to fail. Zuko knows they're going to fail because Azula discovered the plan weeks ago, and the Fire Nation has been preparing ever since. The palace will be evacuated, the Fire Lord will be hidden in an underground bunker, and the invasion will accomplish nothing except getting a lot of brave people killed. But the eclipse also represents something else. 8 minutes when his father can't bend, can't fight back, can't use fire to punish disobedience. 8 minutes when Zuko can speak truth without fear of being burned alive. Well, fear is still there. Fear is definitely present. But at least the threat of immediate immolation is temporarily off the table. He rehearses what he's going to say, practices in front of mirrors when he's supposed to be sleeping, works through different phrasings and arguments. He needs to tell his father that he's leaving, that he's going to join the Avatar, that the Fire Nation's plan for genocide is monstrous, and Zuko won't be part of it. Also, he'd like to know what happened to his mother, but that's probably pushing his luck. The day of the eclipse arrives with all the dramatic tension of someone walking toward their own execution. The palace evacuates according to plan. Generals and nobles filing into underground bunkers, servants sent to safe houses, everything coordinated with military precision. Azula oversees it all with the smug satisfaction of someone who's outsmarted the enemy before they even arrived. She looks at Zuko during the evacuation and says something pointed about loyalty, about how father will remember who stood by him during this crisis and who hesitated. The implication is clear. She's watching him, waiting for him to slip up, ready to report any deviation from perfect obedience. Zuko nods and says nothing, which is probably suspicious in itself because when has he ever been quiet when Azula provokes him? But she's busy managing the crisis, so she lets it slide, files it away for later scrutiny. Ozai retreats to his personal bunker, the most secure location in the entire palace complex. Underground, reinforced, designed to withstand siege. He expects to wait out the eclipse alone, then emerge victorious when the invasion fails and his bending returns. Instead, Zuko follows him down. Shows up at the bunker entrance and announces he needs to speak with the Fire Lord. The guards look confused. Shouldn't Prince Zuko be in his own secure location? But they let him pass because he's royal family and this is a family bunker technically. Ozai is less confused and more annoyed. He's reviewing invasion defense strategies, confirming that every detail of Azula's counterplan is in place, and he doesn't have time for whatever teenage crisis Zuko is experiencing. Dismisses him with a wave, tells him to go be useful somewhere else. Zuko doesn't leave, plants his feet and says he's here to talk, and they're going to talk before the eclipse ends and this chance disappears. Now Ozai is paying attention, looks at his son with the calculating interest of someone recognizing that something has shifted. Something is different about the scarred prince who usually radiates desperate need for approval. There's no desperation now, just determination, and something that might be peace, which on Zuko looks almost like resignation. The eclipse begins. Darkness falls across the Fire Nation as the moon passes in front of the sun, and firebending winks out across an entire nation like someone flipped a switch. 8 minutes, that's all Zuko has. He starts talking. Not with the rehearsed speech he practiced, that all evaporates the moment he opens his mouth. Instead, what comes out is raw truth, unfiltered and aching with everything he's been holding back for months. He talks about the last 3 years, about exile, about hunting the Avatar, about learning that the Fire Nation isn't bringing balance to the world but destroying it. About serving tea in Ba Sing Se and being nobody and almost finding peace. About the refugees, the victims, the people whose lives were crushed under Fire Nation boots, while soldiers talked about glory and honour. He talks about coming home and realising home was built on suffering. About sitting in war councils and hearing genocide discussed like it's a reasonable strategy. About nightmares where his mother looks at him with disappointment because he's becoming exactly what she feared. Ozai listens with the expression of someone watching an insect struggle in amber, mildly interested but fundamentally unmoved. When Zuko pauses for breath, his father speaks with the cold precision of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. The Fire Nation is right, their conquest is justified, weakness and mercy are flaws, not virtues. Zuko's problem is he never understood this, never had the strength to do what's necessary. He's always been too much like his mother, soft, sentimental, burdened with useless compassion. Then Ozai says something that cuts deeper than any burn. He says that Azula was born lucky. Zuko was lucky to be born. It's such a perfectly calibrated cruelty that for a moment Zuko can't breathe. His father has always been disappointed in him, always preferred Azula, but having it stated so plainly that his existence is luck rather than intention, that he was never wanted, never valued, lands like a firebending strike to the chest. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom repeatedly. Eventually you learn to recognize the ground. And Zuko has been here before, has felt this exact rejection, and he's not the same desperate 13-year-old who begged for mercy while his face burned. He straightens his spine and says that's fine. He doesn't need his father's approval anymore. Doesn't want it, actually, because seeking approval from someone this cruel was destroying him from the inside. Then Zuko delivers the real truth. The thing he came here to say. He's leaving. He's going to join the Avatar and help stop this war. He's going to make sure the Fire Nation doesn't commit genocide when the comet arrives. And if that makes him a traitor, then so be it, because being loyal to this would make him a monster. Ozai's face goes through several expressions, finally settling on rage so pure it's almost impressive. He stands, towers over Zuko like he did at the Agni Kai all those years ago, and informs his son that leaving is treason. That helping the Avatar is treason. That this conversation itself is treason. And treason, Ozai continues, is punishable by death. The moment the eclipse ends, he's going to burn Zuko to ashes. No exile this time. No second chances. Just execution, here and now, because Ozai is done being disappointed by a son who refuses to be the weapon he was supposed to become. Zuko nods like he expected this. Probably did expect it. And he says one more thing before the moment of truth arrives. He wants to know what happened to his mother, where Ursa went, why she left, whether she's alive. Ozai smiles. It's not a nice smile. Says that Ursa committed treason by killing Fire Lord Ozai to save Zuko's life. Apparently Ozai ordered Ozai to kill his own son, as punishment for asking to be named heir after Lu Ten died. Ursa made a deal. She'd eliminate Ozai, and Ozai would spare Zuko and banish her instead. So Zuko's mother saved him. Gave up everything, her home, her children, her entire life, to protect him from his grandfather's cruelty and his father's ambition. She's alive somewhere, exiled and alone, because she loved her son enough to sacrifice herself. The information lands like a bomb. Zuko's entire understanding of his family's history rearranges itself around this truth. His mother didn't abandon him. She saved him. And Ozai let her, not out of mercy, but because it was politically convenient. Then the eclipse ends. Sunlight returns, and with it, fire bending. Ozai immediately generates lightning. Not fire, not warning shots. Straight to lethal force because he's done playing games with his disappointing son. The lightning crackles between his fingers, building charge, and Zuko has maybe 2 seconds to live. Unless he uses the technique Iroh taught him, the one his uncle developed by studying waterbenders, by learning from other nations instead of assuming the Fire Nation had all the answers. A technique Ozai doesn't know exists because he's too arrogant to learn from enemies. The lightning shoots forward. Zuko moves into the stance Iroh drilled into him during those tea shop days in Bussing Sea, arm extended, body sideways, creating a path for the lightning to travel through him rather than into him. Catches the bolt in his fingertips, guides it down one arm, through his stomach away from his heart, out the other arm, and redirects it. Not at Ozai. Zuko aims deliberately to the side, blowing out a chunk of bunker wall instead. Because killing his father would make him exactly what Ozai accused him of being. A traitor, a patricide, someone who can't rise above violence. But defending himself while refusing to escalate. That's something Iroh would be proud of. That's honor that doesn't depend on dominating others. Ozai stares at the destroyed wall, at his son who just survived and redirected lightning, and for the first time in this conversation he looks genuinely surprised, maybe even impressed, though on him it manifests as reassessing how dangerous Zuko has become. Zuko doesn't stick around to discuss it. Just turns and runs, sprinting through palace corridors while guards try to figure out what's happening. The eclipse is over, the invasion is failing, and Prince Zuko is apparently staging a one-person coup by fleeing dramatically. He makes it outside, steals a war balloon, because apparently his escape plan included vehicle theft, and flies away from the only home he's ever known. Behind him, the Fire Nation capital shrinks to toy-sized perfection, and ahead is nothing but uncertainty and the slim hope that the Avatar will let him help. Also behind him, Ozai screaming orders to shoot down the balloon, guards scrambling, Azula probably smirking because she totally called this, and whatever remains of his relationship with Mai exploding spectacularly. The war balloon is not designed for one person to operate, but Zuko manages through sheer determination and the muscle memory of having a decent crew back on his ship. He flies toward the Western Air Temple, because that's where rumours place the Avatar, and if rumours are wrong, well, he's just committed treason for nothing. The journey takes days of flying, hiding, avoiding Fire Nation patrols that are definitely looking for him by now. Days of second-guessing this decision, wondering if the Avatar will even listen, contemplating the very real possibility that he just threw away his life for nothing. He practices what he's going to say, tries to find words that'll convince Team Avatar he's changed, that his joining them isn't a trick or a trap. Every version sounds inadequate. How do you apologise for months of hunting someone, for nearly killing them, for betraying their trust when they were starting to see you as human? The Western Air Temple appears below him, inverted architecture hanging from a cliff, designed by airbenders who saw the world differently than everyone else. It's beautiful and impossible, and somewhere down there is a 12-year-old who holds the world's fate in his hands. Zuko lands the balloon messily because piloting isn't really his strong suit. Approaches the temple on foot, trying to look non-threatening, which is difficult when you're a firebender approaching airbending territory. He sees them from a distance. Team Avatar, plus several others he doesn't recognise, must be invasion survivors regrouping. They're talking, probably processing the failed invasion, and they haven't noticed him yet. This is it. The moment where everything changes or nothing does. Where Zuko either starts genuinely redeeming himself, or gets very reasonably attacked by people he's wronged repeatedly. He steps forward, calls out, and when they all turn to look at him with expressions ranging from shock to rage to Toph's bored "I knew it," he delivers possibly the worst introduction in diplomatic history. "Hello, Zuko here." The silence that follows could cut steel. Katara looks ready to turn him into a Zuko-flavoured popsicle. Sokka grabs his boomerang. Aang just stares with confusion because what is happening? Why is Zuko here? Is this a trap? Zuko, realising his opening needs work, launches into an explanation. He's here to teach Aang firebending. He's changed sides. He's good now. Please don't murder him. He's very sincere about this. The response is immediate and unanimous. Absolutely not. Katara reminds everyone loudly that Zuko sent an assassin after them. Sokka points out the numerous times Zuko tried to capture Aang. Aang mentions the whole siding with Azula in the Crystal Catacombs thing, which, fair point. Zuko tries to explain, talks about leaving the Fire Nation, about confronting his father, about wanting to make things right. It comes out wrong, defensive when he should be apologetic, justifying when he should be accepting responsibility. They reject him, completely, unanimously, without reservation, tell him to leave, that they don't trust him, that showing up and saying "I'm good now" doesn't erase months of being the enemy. He tries again the next day, and the day after, keeps showing up, keeps trying to explain, keeps getting rejected, sets up camp nearby and just persists, which is either dedication or harassment depending on your perspective. Then Combustion Man shows up, and things go from awkward to violent. Combustion Man is an assassin. Zuko hired him weeks ago, back when he was still hunting the Avatar, and apparently the guy didn't get the memo about the change in plans. Now he's here, explosion bending at the temple, trying to kill Aang and collect his payment. Zuko does something either very brave or very stupid. He steps between Combustion Man and the Avatar, tells the assassin to stop, that he doesn't want Aang dead anymore, that this entire contract is void. Combustion Man responds by trying to blow up Zuko, because assassins don't generally accept contract cancellations gracefully. The fight that follows is chaotic. Team Avatar fighting Combustion Man while also being deeply confused about Zuko fighting Combustion Man. Zuko yelling about how this wasn't supposed to happen, and maybe someone should aim for the eye tattoo on the assassin's forehead. Sokka lands a boomerang shot that disrupts Combustion Man's bending at exactly the wrong moment. The explosion backfires spectacularly, and the assassin falls off the cliff in what can only be described as karma working overtime. In the aftermath, Team Avatar stares at Zuko, who's bleeding and exhausted and possibly going into shock. He just saved them. Fought his own hired assassin to protect them, nearly died doing it. Aang considers this, looks at his friends, looks at Zuko, and makes a decision that'll change everything. Okay, he can stay. He can teach firebending, but the moment he does anything suspicious, anything that suggests this is a trick, they're done. Zuko nods, accepting these terms, probably not believing this is actually happening. He did it, convinced them to give him a chance, even if that chance comes with more suspicion than trust. Katara pulls him aside later, makes it absolutely clear that she doesn't forgive him, doesn't trust him, and if he hurts Aang, she will personally ensure he regrets it. Her eyes promise violence, and Zuko believes every word. That's fair. That's more than fair. He betrayed her specifically in Ba Sing Se, and she has every right to hate him forever. He tells her he understands. He's not expecting forgiveness. He's just trying to do better, trying to make different choices, trying to be someone his uncle wouldn't be ashamed of. Katara doesn't soften. Good. She shouldn't. Trust is earned through consistent action, not clever words, and Zuko has a lot of actions to answer for. That night, Zuko sits by a fire at the Western Air Temple, surrounded by people who hate him, teaching fire bending to an avatar who's watching him with cautious hope. And he feels something unexpected. Relief. He's free. Free from his father's expectations, from the Fire Nation's lies, from the desperate need for approval that's controlled him since childhood. Free to be wrong, to learn, to grow into someone better than his bloodline suggests. It's terrifying. It's liberating. It's the hardest thing he's ever done, showing up every day to face people who have every reason to reject him and asking them to believe he's changed. But for the first time since the Agni Kai, Zuko is choosing his own path instead of following someone else's. And if that path includes getting rocks thrown at him by a 12-year-old with godlike powers, well, redemption was never supposed to be easy. Camping with people who recently wanted you dead is awkward in ways that etiquette books don't prepare you for. Zuko discovers this within the first hour of being accepted into Team Avatar, when he tries to help set up camp and accidentally uses the wrong terminology for everything, because Fire Nation military protocols don't translate to group of teenagers living in a temple. Sokka corrects him with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a particularly slow child. That's not how you arrange sleeping bags. That's not where the food supplies go. And for the love of everything, stop standing at attention when someone asks you a question. This isn't a military operation, it's just dinner. Zuko nods and tries to relax, which he's phenomenally bad at. His version of relaxed looks like someone's holding him at sword point and demanding he appear calm. Years of palace etiquette and military discipline haven't prepared him for the casual chaos of Team Avatar, where people interrupt each other constantly, argue about nothing, and somehow make decisions through what appears to be organised chaos. Toph is the easiest to deal with, mostly because she treats everyone with equal disdain and doesn't care about past grievances. She calls Zuko Sparky within 5 minutes of him joining, and when he protests that his name is Zuko, she points out that she's blind and couldn't care less about his preferences. Sparky it is. Weirdly, he doesn't hate it. There's something refreshing about Toph's complete lack of deference, her refusal to treat him like a prince or a threat or anything other than another person she might earthbend into a wall if he gets annoying. Sokka is suspicious but pragmatic. He watches Zuko like a hawk, takes inventory of all weapons in Zuko's possession, and establishes ground rules about where Zuko can and can't go in the temple. But he also acknowledges that they need a firebending teacher, and Zuko technically qualifies, so they're going to make this work even if it's uncomfortable. Katara doesn't pretend to be okay with any of this. She makes her position crystal clear through aggressive silence, pointed glares, and the occasional comment about how traitors can't be trusted. Every time Zuko enters a room, the temperature drops. Not metaphorically, literally, because Katara's that good at waterbending and passive aggression. Aang is caught in the middle, wanting to believe Zuko has changed, but also remembering the Blue Spirit incident. The numerous fights, the betrayal in Ba Sing Se. He's cautiously hopeful, which on a 12-year-old manifests as asking Zuko questions about the Fire Nation, while maintaining enough distance to dodge if it turns out to be a trap. And Zuko is trying so hard to fit in that it's almost painful to watch. He offers to help with chores and somehow makes everything harder. He tries to make small talk and lands every conversational beat like someone learning social skills from a manual. He laughs at jokes approximately 3 seconds too late, after processing whether laughter is the appropriate response. It's like watching someone learn to be human in real time, and it's both endearing and deeply uncomfortable. The first firebending lesson is a disaster of legendary proportions. Aang is excited, ready to learn, bouncing with enthusiasm because finally he gets to study fire, without the person teaching him trying to capture him afterward. Zuko sets up a training area, explains basic forms, and prepares to demonstrate. He takes his stance, focuses his energy, punches forward with the explosive force that should generate fire. Nothing happens, not weak fire, not small fire, literally nothing. Just air movement from the punch, which is embarrassing for everyone involved. Zuko tries again. Different form, different technique, putting more aggression into it. Still nothing. The fire that's defined him since childhood, that burned hotter with his rage and desperation, has apparently decided to take a vacation at the worst possible time. Panic sets in. Zuko tries every firebending form he knows, cycles through techniques learned over years of training, and produces absolutely zero fire. It's like the connection has been severed, like whatever made him a bender has disappeared overnight. Team Avatar watches this breakdown with varying degrees of concern and confusion. Sokka suggests maybe Zuko ate some bad Komodo chicken. Toph says she can feel Zuko's panic through earthbending, and it's making her uncomfortable. Katara looks almost satisfied, like this is cosmic justice for betrayal. Aang just looks worried, because they need a firebending teacher, and their only option apparently can't bend anymore. Zuko excuses himself, retreats to a remote part of the temple and has a complete crisis of identity. His firebending was the one thing he was consistently good at, the one skill that never failed him even when everything else did. Without it, what is he? A failed prince from a nation he betrayed, with no bending, no purpose, no way to help defeat his father. The irony is devastating. He finally chooses the right side, finally commits to helping the Avatar, and immediately loses the one thing that made him useful. That evening, Zuko admits to Aang that something's wrong. The fire is gone, and he doesn't know how to get it back. Aang, displaying wisdom beyond his years, suggests they figure it out together. Maybe the problem isn't Zuko's ability. Maybe it's his source. This leads to a conversation about what fuels firebending. Zuko was taught that fire comes from rage, from aggression, from the desire to dominate and destroy. That's how the Fire Nation trains its benders. Tap into anger, channel hatred, use your darkest emotions as fuel. But Zuko isn't angry anymore, not the way he used to be. The desperate, consuming rage that drove him for 3 years has burned away, replaced by something quieter, but more sustainable. He's not trying to prove himself through violence anymore, not channeling pain into flame. So if rage is gone and rage was his source, then yes, his fire is gone too. Aang suggests an alternative. Maybe there's another way to firebend. After all, he's learned waterbending from emotion and flow, earthbending from stability and strength. Maybe fire can come from something other than anger. Zuko doesn't believe this. He's been training since childhood, and every Fire Nation instructor emphasized the same thing. Fire is destruction, fire is power, fire is rage made manifest. Suggesting there's another way is like suggesting water could flow uphill. But he's desperate enough to try anything. So when Aang proposes they seek out the Sun Warriors, the original firebenders who predate the Fire Nation's military philosophy, Zuko agrees. Because what else is he going to do? Sit here unable to bend while the world hangs in the balance? The journey to the Sun Warriors' ruins is tense and awkward. Just Zuko and Aang, which means confronting their shared history without the buffer of other people. They walk through Earth Kingdom wilderness, and occasionally Aang asks questions that cut straight to uncomfortable truths. Like why Zuko chose to come back to the Fire Nation in Ba Sing Se. What made him think his father's approval was worth betraying Iroh's love? Zuko doesn't have good answers. Says he was scared, confused, convinced that going home would fix everything broken inside him. He was wrong, obviously. Going home just revealed how broken the home itself was. Aang listens without judgment, which is somehow worse than accusation. He's just processing, trying to understand, occasionally offering observations about fear and choice that sound like they came from someone who's lived 800 years if you count the iceberg time. They find the Sun Warriors' city hidden in jungle that hasn't been touched by the war. Ancient stone architecture covered in vines, statues depicting dragons and fire in forms that don't look violent or aggressive. Everything about this place suggests a different relationship with flame. Reverence instead of conquest, balance instead of domination. The Sun Warriors appear like ghosts from history, descendants of the civilization that first learned firebending from dragons. They're suspicious of outsiders, especially Fire Nation outsiders, but Aang's status as Avatar grants them audience with the Chief. The Chief listens to their request, teaches the true nature of firebending, and decides they must prove themselves worthy. They'll present themselves to the Masters, Ran and Shaw, the last two dragons in the world. If the dragons judge them worthy, they'll learn. If not, well, dragonfire is a pretty definitive rejection. Zuko points out that his great-grandfather supposedly killed the last dragon. The Chief smiles and says the Fire Nation believes many lies, including that one. Dragons are very much alive, just hidden from a nation that turned firebending into a weapon. The preparation is ceremonial and intense. Zuko and Aang must carry the eternal flame up a mountain to the Dragon Master's cave. The flame represents the first fire, the origin of bending before it was corrupted by human ambition. If they let it extinguish, they fail automatically. Carrying fire up a mountain while not being able to firebend is Zuko's new definition of irony. He holds the flame like it's the most precious thing in the world, which it kind of is, and tries not to think about what happens if he trips. Aang carries his flame with the grace of someone who spent a century as an airbending prodigy before learning 3 other elements. He makes it look easy, which is mildly infuriating but also impressive. They reach the cave. The dragons emerge, massive, ancient, powerful in ways that make Ozai look like he's playing with matches. Ran and Shaw, red and blue, representing the duality of fire, the balance required to truly master the element. The dragons circle them, examining, judging. Zuko feels heat that doesn't burn, fire that creates rather than destroys. They're reading him, understanding his intent, deciding if he's worthy of learning what they have to teach. Then they perform the dancing dragon. It's not a fight or a display of dominance. It's a dance, literally. Fire moving in patterns that are beautiful and terrifying, and fundamentally different from Fire Nation military forms. The flames create rainbows, shift through colours, form shapes that look alive. This is firebending as art, as life, as energy that can create or destroy depending on the bender's intent. Zuko watches and understands, finally, what firebending was always supposed to be. Not a weapon, not an expression of rage, but a connection to life itself. Fire is the sun keeping the world warm. Fire is the energy in every living thing. Fire is transformation, renewal, the force that breaks down to build up. He and Aang mirror the dragon's movements, and for the first time since joining Team Avatar, Zuko bends. Not from anger or fear, but from understanding, from connection to something larger than his personal pain. The fire that emerges is different, warmer, steadier, more controlled. It doesn't feel like violence. It feels like breathing, like extending his life force outward in visible form. When the dance ends and the dragons retreat, Zuko realizes he's crying. Not from sadness, but from relief, from the overwhelming experience of reconnecting with his element in a way that doesn't require rage or hatred. Aang is grinning like someone who just solved a puzzle, because of course firebending can be peaceful. Of course there's a way to bend that doesn't hurt. He turns to Zuko and says something that lands with surprising weight. Now Zuko can teach him firebending the right way, the way it was always meant to be. The journey back down the mountain is lighter somehow. They talk about philosophy and balance and the ways nations have corrupted bending into war. Aang suggests that maybe teaching all nations the original ways of bending could heal some of the damage, help people remember that these gifts weren't meant for conquest. Zuko points out this is extremely idealistic. Aang shrugs and says idealism is basically his job description. When they return to the Western Air Temple, Team Avatar is waiting with varying expressions of curiosity and concern. Did it work? Can Zuko bend now? Is this going to be another disaster? Zuko takes his stance, centers himself, and generates fire with the ease of someone who's finally found the right source. Not rage, not aggression, just steady, controlled flame that looks almost peaceful. Toph slow claps. Sokka looks relieved because having a firebending teacher who can't firebend was an awkward situation. Katara remains suspicious but acknowledges that at least now they can start actual lessons. The first real lesson happens the next day. Zuko teaches Aang proper forms, but with completely different philosophy than he learned. He explains fire as life energy, demonstrates breathing techniques that draw power from inner peace rather than outer rage. Aang takes to it immediately because of course he does. The kids are natural at everything. He generates flames that look almost cheerful, which shouldn't be possible, but somehow fits Aang's personality perfectly. Watching Aang learn, Zuko realizes teaching is different from performing. He has to break down techniques he's done instinctively since childhood, explain the mechanics, adjust his approach based on Aang's learning style. It's harder than just demonstrating, but it's also satisfying in ways he didn't expect. He's good at this, not just adequate, actually good. Patient when Aang struggles, encouraging when techniques click, able to spot problems and adjust teaching methods accordingly. All those years of training, of perfecting forms while hunting the Avatar, have given him a deep understanding of firebending mechanics. Plus, he's genuinely invested in Aang's success now, not because it serves his mission, but because the world needs a fully realized Avatar, and helping achieve that is the most meaningful thing Zuko has ever done. The bonding happens gradually, almost despite everyone's intentions. Sokka starts asking Zuko for input on invasion strategies, recognizing that Zuko knows Fire Nation military tactics intimately. Toph challenges him to earthbending versus firebending sparring matches that are mostly excuses to throw each other into walls. Even Katara softens incrementally, though softens means she goes from actively hostile to merely suspicious. She watches Zuko teach Aang with the intensity of someone ready to intervene if anything seems wrong, but she also starts acknowledging when he does something helpful. One evening, Zuko helps prepare dinner, a skill learned during months as a refugee, and Katara grudgingly admits the food is decent. It's not forgiveness, not even close, but it's acknowledgement that he's trying. The breakthrough comes during a conversation about mothers. They're sitting by the fire, Team Avatar swapping stories about families, and someone mentions Katara's mother. The grief on her face is visible, raw even years later. Zuko says quietly that he understands. His mother disappeared too, banished for treason to protect him from his grandfather's cruelty. He spent years wondering if she was alive, if she thought about him, if leaving him with Ozai and Azula was her biggest regret. Katara looks at him with surprise, because this vulnerability doesn't match the aggressive prince who chased them across the world. They talk about absent mothers, about growing up too fast, about the specific pain of loss without closure. It's not friendship. Not yet. But it's the foundation of something that could become friendship if they both keep trying. Zuko's relationships with each Team Avatar member develop distinct flavors. Sokka becomes almost a brother figure. They bond over military strategy, weapon maintenance, and shared experiences of never being quite good enough for demanding fathers. Toph treats him like an equal, which manifests as constant roasting and the occasional brutal honesty about his personality flaws. Aang starts seeing him as a teacher and potential friend, asking questions about the Fire Nation that aren't about military tactics but about culture, about what normal Fire Nation citizens are like, about whether Zuko thinks the nation can change. And slowly, painfully, Katara begins to trust him. Not fully, not without reservations, but enough to let her guard down occasionally, to laugh at his awkward attempts at humour, to accept that people can change if they do the work. One night, sitting under stars at the Western Air Temple, Zuko realizes something that would have horrified the prince he used to be. He's happy. Not the desperate relief of his father's approval, not the hollow satisfaction of capturing an enemy, just genuine, uncomplicated happiness from belonging to something good. He's part of Team Avatar now. Not fully, not without complications, but part of it nonetheless. He has a purpose that doesn't require hurting people, friends who are starting to believe in him, and a teacher-student relationship with the Avatar that's based on mutual respect rather than obsessive hunting. Zuko lost his fire and found his purpose. Turns out the real firebending mastery was the friends he made along the way. Okay, it was actually the ancient dragons teaching him that fire represents life and energy, rather than destruction. But the friends helped too. They helped a lot, actually, by forcing him to be patient and vulnerable and honest in ways he's never had to be before. And weirdly, terrifyingly, hopefully, it's working. He's becoming someone his uncle would be proud of, someone his mother would recognize as the child she tried to protect, someone who can look at his reflection without seeing a monster staring back. The work isn't finished. He still has to help defeat his father, still has to face Azula eventually, still has to figure out what happens after the war if they actually win. But for now, standing with Team Avatar and teaching the Avatar firebending under a sky full of stars, Zuko allows himself to believe that redemption is possible. Not easy, not quick. Not without setbacks and doubt and moments where everyone questions whether trusting him was a mistake, but possible. And possible is more than he thought he deserved a few weeks ago when he was sitting in the Fire Nation Palace contemplating genocide. So, yeah, he'll take possible, he'll work with possible, and maybe, with enough effort and enough people willing to believe in him, possible will eventually transform into achieved, one day at a time, one lesson at a time, one moment of choosing right over easy, over and over, until it becomes habit instead of struggle. That's redemption. And Zuko's finally on the right path to finding it. Trust is built in small moments, not grand gestures. Zuko learns this through weeks of simply showing up, teaching Aang firebending every morning, helping with chores without being asked, not betraying anyone even when he has opportunities. It's boring, unglamorous work, the daily practice of being decent when no one's watching closely enough to reward it. Sokka is the first to truly warm up, mostly because they bond over the shared experience of having intensely demanding fathers who made them feel inadequate. They're sharpening weapons one afternoon, Sokka his boomerang, Zuko his dual swords, and somehow the conversation turns to family expectations and the weight of living up to impossible standards. Sokka talks about his father leaving for war, about becoming the man of the tribe at 13, about every decision carrying the pressure of not disappointing people who've already sacrificed so much. Zuko counters with stories about palace life, about Ozai's impossible standards, about how even when you do everything right, some parents will find fault because the cruelty is the point. They sit in companionable silence for a while, just two teenagers sharpening blades and processing generational trauma. Then Sokka says something that lands with unexpected weight. At least Zuko got out. At least he chose differently instead of becoming what his father tried to shape him into. Zuko nods, grateful for the acknowledgement, and offers to teach Sokka some Fire Nation sword techniques. Not the flashy stuff, but practical forms designed for close-quarters combat. Sokka accepts with enthusiasm, and their friendship solidifies over shared violence and the understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be what your bloodline suggests. Toph is even easier, mostly because she treats everyone with equal irreverence and doesn't care about anyone's tragic backstory. She challenges Zuko to earthbending versus firebending matches that are supposedly about training, but mostly involve her throwing him into walls while making jokes about his emotional constipation. One day, she earthbends a small rock directly at his head while he's trying to meditate. Zuko catches it with fire, melting it mid-air, and asks what that was about. Toph grins and says she's keeping him on his toes, making sure all this redemption arc nonsense doesn't make him soft. He throws a controlled fireball at her feet. She doesn't flinch, just earthbends it away, and they both start laughing, the kind of aggressive playfulness that comes from trusting someone won't actually hurt you, even when they're throwing elements at your face. Aang's relationship with Zuko deepens through teaching. Every firebending lesson involves philosophy as much as technique, conversations about balance and choice and what it means to use power responsibly. Aang asks questions that would have annoyed the old Zuko but now spark genuine reflection. Like whether Zuko thinks Fire Nation citizens are inherently bad, or if they're just products of propaganda and generational violence. Whether someone raised to believe conquest is righteous can be held responsible for participating in it. Zuko doesn't have easy answers, says that understanding how someone became cruel doesn't excuse the cruelty, but it does help explain how to prevent the next generation from repeating the same mistakes. He thinks about his own childhood, about Azula being shaped into a weapon, about how different things could have been if just one adult had intervened with genuine love instead of conditional approval. Aang listens with the serious intensity of someone who'll soon have to face Ozai and decide whether to kill him. These conversations about morality and justice and redemption aren't abstract. They're preparation for the hardest choice the Avatar will ever make. But Katara remains distant. Polite now, no longer actively hostile, but there's a wall between them built from betrayal in Ba Sing Se and years of fighting against everything Zuko represented. She watches him teach Aang, acknowledges when he's helpful, and maintains careful emotional distance. Zuko understands. He betrayed her specifically. They'd shared that moment in the Crystal Catacombs, that connection over lost mothers and shared grief. And then he'd chosen Azula and helped nearly kill Aang. That kind of betrayal doesn't heal just because someone switches sides and says they're sorry. So he doesn't push, just continues being consistent, being helpful, giving her space to decide whether forgiveness is even possible. Then one night, he overhears Katara and Sokka talking about their mother, about the Fire Nation raid that killed her, about Katara's guilt over being the reason their mother was targeted. She'd been pretending to be the waterbender when soldiers came asking, and their mother died protecting the lie. The grief in Katara's voice is raw and complicated, tangled with survivors' guilt and rage and the particular pain of loss that never fully heals. Sokka tries to comfort her, but some wounds are too deep for sibling reassurance to reach. Zuko makes a decision. The next morning he approaches Katara alone, without witnesses or backup plans. Tells her he knows she's the last person who trusts him, and he understands why. Then he offers her something impossible. Help finding the man who killed her mother. Katara stares at him like he's grown a second head. Asks why he would possibly help with this, what angle he's working, what manipulation he's attempting now. Zuko says it's not manipulation. He knows what it's like to lose a mother, to never get closure, to carry that grief like stones in your chest. If she wants to confront the person responsible, he can help. He has access to Fire Nation records, knows military protocols, can track down the specific soldier who led that raid. She could say no, should say no, probably. Trusting Zuko with something this personal is objectively a bad idea given their history. But the need for closure, for justice, for finally facing the person who took her mother, it overrides caution. She agrees, with conditions. They go alone, they do this her way, and if Zuko betrays her again, she'll kill him, not capture, not arrest, kill him permanently and without hesitation. Zuko nods, accepts these terms, says she should kill him if he betrays her because at that point he'd deserve it. They steal Appa, well, borrow, but without asking, which is basically stealing, and fly toward the Fire Nation military records facility. The journey is tense and quiet, neither of them sure what to say to fill the silence. Katara sits as far from Zuko as possible on Appa's saddle, radiating distrust. Zuko breaks into the records building with the ease of someone who grew up in Fire Nation military culture and knows exactly where security gaps exist. They search through files detailing raids, casualties, orders that treat genocide as administrative paperwork. Finding the specific raid that killed Katara's mother takes hours, but eventually they locate it. Southern Raiders, specific date, specific commanding officer. Yon Ra, that's the name. The man who ordered the raid, who interrogated Katara's mother, who killed her when she wouldn't give up the waterbender. Tracking him is easier than it should be. He retired after the war, took his pension, and settled in a Fire Nation village where he probably tells heroic stories about his military service, without mentioning the villages burned, the families destroyed, the woman murdered for protecting her daughter. They find him in his house, living a comfortable life paid for with blood money. He's older now, softer, looks like someone's grandfather rather than a war criminal. But Katara recognizes him instantly. His face is burned into her memory from that terrible day when Fire Nation soldiers invaded her village. The confrontation is brutal in its honesty. Katara waterbends rain into his house, pins him against a wall, and demands he look at her. Demands he remember the Southern Water Tribe raid, the woman he killed, the child whose life he destroyed. Yon-Ra is terrified, babbles about following orders, about it being war, about he's just a soldier doing his duty. Tries to shift blame to his mother, says she's sick, she's dying. What about her? Classic manipulation, using family as a shield against consequences. Katara doesn't care about his mother, doesn't care about his excuses. She's here for justice, for closure, for the satisfaction of making this man face what he's done. She raises water into deadly ice spikes poised to kill. Zuko watches without interfering because this is her choice, her pain, her right to decide what justice means. For a long moment, Katara holds that ice, holds Yonra's life in her hands. She could kill him, should kill him, by some measures. He's a murderer who's never faced consequences, who's living peacefully while her mother is dead. But killing him won't bring her mother back, won't heal the wound, will just add another death to the pile of violence that defines this war. She lowers the ice, not because she forgives Yonra, she makes that explicitly clear, but because he's pathetic, weak, not worth becoming a killer over. Her mother wouldn't want Katara to carry that burden, to let revenge poison the rest of her life. She turns and walks away, leaving Yonra alive but marked by the encounter, probably waking up to nightmares for years about the girl who could have killed him and chose mercy instead. Outside, Katara breaks down. Not from regret about not killing him, but from the release of finally confronting that pain, of choosing her own response rather than letting trauma dictate her actions. Zuko stands nearby, not sure if comfort would be welcome, not sure what to say to someone who just displayed more strength than most people achieve in a lifetime. Finally, Katara speaks, thanks him for helping her find Yonra, for not interfering in her choice, for understanding that justice doesn't always mean violence. Then she says something that nearly breaks Zuko. She was wrong about him. Not completely. He did terrible things, earned her distrust, hurt people she loves. But he's also changed, genuinely changed, proven through actions that people can choose differently, can become better than their worst moments. She forgives him. Not Yonra, but Zuko. And she's choosing to trust him, to let go of that wall she's maintained, to see him as part of Team Avatar instead of a former enemy tolerating their presence. The flight back to the Western Air Temple is different. They talk about their mothers, about grief and forgiveness, and the difference between excusing someone's actions and choosing not to let those actions control your life. Katara explains why she couldn't forgive Yonra. Because he's not sorry, hasn't changed, doesn't deserve mercy he wouldn't extend to others. But Zuko is sorry. Zuko has changed. Zuko has spent weeks proving through consistent action that his redemption is genuine. That's the difference between forgiving someone and simply choosing not to kill them. When they land, the rest of Team Avatar is waiting with varying levels of concern and confusion. Sokka demands to know where they've been, why they stole Appa, whether Katara is okay. Katara looks at Zuko, then at her brother and says simply, I trust him now. Completely. The shift in group dynamics is immediate and tangible. If Katara trusts Zuko after everything, then he's truly one of them. Aang beams. Sokka relaxes. Toph says, finally, like this resolution was painfully overdue. But building trust with Team Avatar doesn't resolve Zuko's complicated feelings about his actual family. His relationship with Mai is functionally over. They haven't communicated since he fled the Fire Nation, and everything that connected them was rooted in a version of himself he's deliberately left behind. When a messenger hawk arrives carrying a letter from Mai, Zuko opens it with dread. She's breaking up with him, which is expected. But the letter is remarkably honest. She loved him. Or at least loved who she thought he was, but the Zuko who'd betray his nation for moral principles is someone she doesn't recognize. She's not angry, not even disappointed, really. Just accepting that they want different lives, different futures. She'll stay in the Fire Nation, probably marry someone appropriate, live the comfortable life she's always known. And Zuko will do whatever righteous rebellion he's committed to, and they'll both move on. It's the most amicable breakup possible under the circumstances, and it still hurts. Not devastating heartbreak, but the sad acknowledgement that sometimes people grow in different directions, and love isn't enough to bridge that gap. Then there's Azula. Reports reach them about her increasing instability. Paranoid, erratic, seeing enemies everywhere. She's been named Fire Lord after Ozai decided to crown himself Phoenix King, and the pressure is destroying what remained of her carefully constructed perfection. Zuko feels guilty about this in ways he can't fully articulate. Azula tormented him for years, was complicit in his abuse, actively tried to kill him multiple times. But she's also a victim of Ozai's manipulation, shaped into a weapon since childhood, never given the unconditional love that might have saved her from this path. He wonders if things would be different if he'd reached out to her, tried to help her see that their father's approval wasn't worth the cost. But he was too busy saving himself, too focused on his own redemption to consider that Azula might need saving too. Aang points out that you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, who doesn't believe they need saving. Azula chose her path just like Zuko chose his, and while circumstances influenced both of them, at some point personal responsibility matters. Zuko knows this is true, still feels the weight of leaving his sister behind, of being the one who escaped while she drowned in expectations and toxicity. The conversation turns to Ursa. Now that Zuko knows his mother was banished rather than killed, that she's alive somewhere, he starts wondering if he could find her, if reuniting with the parent who actually loved him is possible, or if that's another dream that'll shatter under scrutiny. Katara suggests that maybe after the war, when things settle, Zuko could search for her, could have that reunion, those answers about why she left and whether she's thought about him over the years. The possibility plants hope in Zuko's chest, dangerous, fragile hope that he might not be completely alone, that somewhere his mother is alive and possibly wondering about the son she sacrificed everything to save. But first, there's a war to win, a comet approaching, a father to face and a world to save from genocide. Team Avatar spends their evenings planning the invasion, discussing strategies, preparing for the final confrontation. Zuko contributes Fire Nation intelligence, tactical knowledge, insights about Ozai's psychology and weaknesses. Sokka asks if Zuko will be okay fighting his own father, possibly killing him if necessary. Zuko says he'll do what's needed because Ozai stopped being his father the moment he burned a 13-year-old's face for showing compassion. What matters now is stopping him, ending this war, making sure the Fire Nation can't commit genocide when the comet arrives. They discuss what happens after. Aang asks what Zuko wants from the future. Return to the Fire Nation as Fire Lord? Live in exile somewhere peaceful? Spend his days serving tea like Iroh? Zuko doesn't have answers. Hasn't thought past stopping Ozai, preventing catastrophe, surviving the next few weeks. The future feels impossibly distant, too uncertain to plan for, but Katara says something that sticks with him. Whatever Zuko decides, Team Avatar will support him. He's not alone anymore. He has friends, people who care about him, not for what he can offer, but for who he is. That night, Zuko sits on Appa's head during a rare moment of peace, looking at stars and processing how dramatically his life has changed. A year ago, he was hunting these people. 6 months ago, he betrayed them in Ba Sing Se. Now they're his family, found family, the kind you choose rather than inherit. He thinks about Iroh, wondering if his uncle knows what he's done, whether news of Zuko joining Team Avatar has reached him, whether Iroh is proud or skeptical or just waiting to see if this change is genuine or another false start. Zuko hopes it's pride, hopes that somewhere his uncle is drinking tea and smiling because his nephew finally chose the right path. But even if Iroh never forgives him, even if that bridge is burned beyond repair, Zuko knows he's made the right choice. Because honor isn't about what other people think of you, it's about living with yourself, making choices you can defend without shame, being the kind of person who does right even when it costs everything. Zuko learned that some wounds don't heal, they just become part of your story, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone else choose mercy when you couldn't. Katara's forgiveness doesn't erase what he did in Ba Sing Se, doesn't make those choices okay or justified, but it proves that redemption is possible if you do the work, if you show up consistently, if you let people see you're genuinely trying to be better. The hardest battles are with ourselves, with the parts that want easy answers, with the voices inherited from parents who hurt us, with the comfortable lies that excuse our worst actions. Zuko is winning those battles, not perfectly, not without setbacks, but winning nonetheless, and surrounded by friends who believe in him, teaching the Avatar firebending, preparing to face his father one last time. He's finally becoming the person he was always meant to be. Someone his mother would be proud of. Someone his uncle can love without reservation. Someone who can look at his reflection and see a hero instead of a monster. That's worth more than any crown, any title, any approval from a father who was never going to give it anyway. There's a secret hidden in Zuko's bloodline that'll recontextualize everything about his existence, his struggles, and why the universe seems personally invested in making his life as complicated as possible. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, There's the matter of a mysterious dragon artifact and Zuko's complete inability to leave well enough alone. It starts with Sokka finding an old Fire Nation headpiece in the Western Air Temple's ruins. Looks important, definitely royal, possibly cursed because that's how artifacts work in this universe. Zuko recognizes it immediately. It belonged to someone in the royal family, but the design predates modern Fire Nation aesthetics by generations. When he touches it, something activates. Not explosively, not dangerously, just a warm pulse of energy that feels oddly familiar. Aang experiences the same thing simultaneously, which shouldn't be possible unless these two are connected in ways neither of them understands. That night they both have visions, not dreams. Too vivid, too coherent, too much like watching someone else's memories projected directly into their consciousness. And these aren't random memories. These are specific, intentional, almost like someone's trying to teach them something important. Aang's vision takes him into Avatar Roku's past. He sees his previous incarnation as a young man, training in firebending, growing in power and wisdom. But more importantly, he sees Roku's best friend, a young man named Sozin, Prince of the Fire Nation, who laughs with Roku and talks about their future, about the amazing things they'll accomplish together. The friendship is genuine, deep, the kind of bond where two people finish each other's sentences and trust each other completely. Sozin and Roku aren't just friends, they're brothers in everything but blood, complementary halves of a whole. Zuko's vision shows the same friendship from Sozin's perspective. He sees his great-grandfather as a young man, before power corrupted him, before ambition transformed into conquest. Sozin is idealistic, energetic, genuinely believes he can make the world better through Fire Nation innovation and strength. He shares these dreams with Roku, talks about spreading Fire Nation prosperity to other nations, bringing order to what he sees as chaos, and Roku listens as a friend, doesn't immediately reject these ideas because they haven't yet revealed themselves as genocidal imperialism in disguise. The visions continue, jumping forward in time. Roku becomes the Avatar, masters all four elements, embraces his role as keeper of balance. Sozin becomes Fire Lord, inherits a nation, and all the weight of expectation that comes with leading a powerful kingdom. Their lives diverge. Roku travels the world, learns from different cultures, develops deep respect for the diversity that makes the world rich and complex. Sozin stays in the Fire Nation, surrounded by advisors who reinforce his belief in Fire Nation superiority, in manifest destiny that justifies expansion. The friendship strains but doesn't break. Not yet. They still meet, still talk, still care about each other despite their increasingly different worldviews. Then comes the moment that changes everything. Sozin reveals his true plan. He wants to share Fire Nation prosperity with the world, by force if necessary. Wants to expand their borders, bring other nations under Fire Nation rule, create an empire that spans the globe. Roku says no, absolutely not. The Avatar's job is maintaining balance between nations, not helping one dominate the others. He makes it clear that if Sozin pursues this expansion, they'll be enemies. Friendship won't protect the Fire Lord from the Avatar's duty. Sozin backs down, promises to abandon his imperial ambitions. Says he values their friendship more than conquest, that Roku's wisdom has shown him another path. He's lying, planning, waiting. Years pass, decades. Roku grows older, establishes himself as a legendary Avatar, maintains peace through wisdom, and when necessary, overwhelming force. Sozin grows older too, watching his ambitions age alongside him, becoming increasingly desperate to act before death, claims his chance at immortality through legacy. Then a volcano erupts on Roku's home island. The Avatar rushes to save his people, uses all four elements to redirect lava, create barriers, evacuate thousands. It's working. He's going to save everyone, going to prevent catastrophe through sheer determination and bending mastery, until exhaustion catches up, until he's given everything and his body simply can't continue. He collapses on the island surrounded by toxic gas and lava, knowing he's about to die alone. Except, he's not alone. Sozin appears on his dragon, lands beside his oldest friend, and for a moment hope flares. He's here to help, to save Roku, to prove their friendship transcends political disagreement. Sozin reaches out his hand, Roku, weak and dying, reaches back. Their fingers almost touch, salvation just inches away. Then Sozin pulls his hand back, just stands there, watching his best friend suffocate, watching the Avatar die when he could save him with minimal effort. He makes a choice in that moment. Ambition over friendship, power over love, imperial dreams over the person who knew him before the crown distorted everything good inside him. Roku dies, suffocates in toxic gas while his best friend watches, while the person who should have saved him turns away and flies home to plan a genocide that'll start with the air nomads exactly as the next Avatar is born. The betrayal is so profound, so complete, that even watching it through visions makes Zuko physically sick. This is where it started, not with some grand ideological disagreement, not with military necessity or strategic calculation, but with one moment of choosing power over humanity. The 100-Year War began because Sozin let his best friend die so he could pursue conquest without the Avatar stopping him. Every death, every destroyed village, every family torn apart, it traces back to that moment on the volcano, to friendships sacrificed for ambition. Aang wakes from the vision devastated. He's known Sozin started the war, but understanding the personal betrayal behind it adds a layer of tragedy that makes the whole conflict feel even more pointless. This didn't have to happen. If Sozin had just reached 6 more inches, pulled Roku to safety, chosen love over power, the air nomad genocide never occurs, the century of war never starts, Aang never gets frozen in an iceberg. One choice, one moment, and the world burned for 100 years because of it. Zuko wakes from his vision with different horror. He's descended from that. From the man who betrayed the Avatar, who committed genocide, who started a war that consumed the world. Sozin's blood runs in his veins, along with all the cruelty and ambition and willingness to sacrifice anything for power. They share their visions with each other, piecing together the full story. Aang describes Roku's perspective, Zuko fills in Sozin's, and together they reconstruct the moment that changed everything. But then Zuko remembers something the vision showed him. Something about his mother's side of the family. A detail that seemed insignificant until now. He does some research, asks questions, digs into family history that the Fire Nation royal family doesn't advertise, and discovers something that fundamentally changes how he understands his own identity. His mother, Ursa, was descended from Avatar Roku, direct bloodline, skipping a few generations but undeniably connected. Which means Zuko isn't just Fire Lord Sozin's great-grandson, he's also Avatar Roku's great-grandson. He's both. The betrayer and the betrayed, the conqueror and the peacekeeper, Fire Nation royalty and Avatar bloodline tangled together in one very confused teenage prince. When he tells Team Avatar, the reaction is stunned silence. Toph breaks it by saying this is the most dramatic family tree she's ever heard of, and she once met a family where everyone was related to everyone else, through elaborate Earth Kingdom marriage politics. Sokka starts making jokes about Zuko being his own great-great-grandfather's enemy, which doesn't make genealogical sense but captures the absurdity of the situation. Aang just stares at Zuko like he's seeing him for the first time, not as a former enemy or redeemed ally, but as literal family, connected through blood to Roku's legacy. Katara asks the question that matters: what does this mean? How does Zuko reconcile being descended from both the Avatar and the Fire Lord who betrayed him? Zuko doesn't have an immediate answer. Sits with the question, turns it over in his mind, processes the implications. He's spent his whole life defining himself through his father's bloodline. Fire Nation royalty, Ozai's disappointing son, Azulon's disgraced grandson, Sozin's great-grandson carrying the weight of conquest. But he's equally descended from Roku, from an Avatar who stood for balance, who chose peace over power, who died because his best friend betrayed him. That legacy is just as much part of Zuko's inheritance, just as present in his blood and bones. The difference is choice. Genetics don't determine destiny. They just provide options. Zuko can choose which legacy to honour, which ancestor to emulate, which version of himself to become. Sozin chose power and betrayal. Roku chose balance and sacrifice. Both options are available to Zuko through his mixed heritage, and every day, every decision, every moment of choosing right over easy, He's voting for which ancestor he wants to reflect. He tells Team Avatar this, working through the philosophy out loud, says that he used to think his blood made him inevitably a villain, that being Fire Nation royalty meant he was destined for cruelty. But he's also Roku's descendant, which means he has Avatar legacy in his bloodline alongside Imperial ambition. His great-great-grandfather betrayed the Avatar. His great-grandfather on his mother's side was the Avatar. He's the intersection of that betrayal and that legacy, the living embodiment of the choice between conquest and balance. And he chooses balance, chooses Roku's legacy over Sozin's, chooses to be the bridge his ancestor should have been instead of the betrayer his ancestor became. Aang looks at Zuko with something like awe, because this is what the Avatar is supposed to represent. Not one nation over others, but the bridge between them, the person who can see from multiple perspectives and choose what serves balance rather than power. Zuko isn't the Avatar, but he's carrying that legacy forward by being Fire Nation royalty, who chooses the Avatar's values over his nation's imperialism. The conversation shifts to practical implications. Sozin's comet is approaching. Ozai is planning genocide, and Team Avatar needs to stop him before the Fire Nation can burn the Earth Kingdom to ash. They've been planning their approach, strategizing about how to face the Fire Lord when his bending will be exponentially more powerful. Aang has been dreading this confrontation because the traditional solution, kill the Fire Lord, end the war decisively, violates everything he believes as an air nomad and an Avatar. Taking a life, even a life as destructive as Ozai's, feels wrong on a fundamental level. But letting Ozai live means the war continues, the genocide proceeds, millions die. The math is brutal, one life versus countless others. Traditional Avatar wisdom says you take the one life and save the many. Aang can't accept this, won't accept it, keeps searching for an alternative that probably doesn't exist. Zuko understands this struggle in ways he couldn't have a year ago. Used to think moral dilemmas were weakness, that strong people just do what's necessary without hesitation. Now he knows that being able to hesitate, to question, to resist easy answers, that's what separates heroes from monsters. He tells Aang he'll support whatever decision he makes. If Aang finds a way to stop Ozai without killing him, Zuko will help however he can. And if the only option is lethal force, well, Zuko won't judge because sometimes the choices we face are all terrible, and we just have to pick the least terrible option. The plan comes together. Aang will face Ozai during the comet, try to find that third option between killing and failing. Sokka, Suki and Toph will sabotage the Fire Nation airship fleet before it can reach the Earth Kingdom. Katara and Zuko will go to the Fire Nation capital to face Azula. Wait, Azula? Yes, apparently Ozai left her to be Fire Lord while he crowned himself Phoenix King, and she's having a complete psychological breakdown about it. Reports say she's paranoid, unstable, seeing enemies everywhere, and generally going through the world's most dramatic mental health crisis in public. Zuko hesitates when they discuss this. Azula tormented him for years, was complicit in his abuse, actively tried to kill him multiple times, but she's also his sister, also a victim of Ozai's manipulation, shaped into a weapon since childhood, now cracking under the pressure of being perfect. Part of him wants to help her, wants to reach out like Iroh reached out to him, offer an alternative to the path she's destroying herself walking. But another part, the part that remembers lightning strikes and betrayal and years of torment, knows that Azula isn't ready for help, isn't looking for redemption, is probably setting traps for anyone stupid enough to offer her mercy. Katara suggests they go anyway, not to save Azula, that's not possible if she doesn't want saving, but to stop her from doing more damage, to contain the threat she represents, to prevent her from executing whatever paranoid schemes she's developed during her breakdown. Zuko agrees. Not happily, not without reservation, but with the grim understanding that facing Azula is necessary, even if it's going to hurt in ways he can't fully prepare for. The night before they split up for their respective missions, Team Avatar sits together one last time. They've become family over these months. Found family, chosen family, the kind that matters more than blood because it's built on trust and shared struggle instead of genetic accident. Aang asks everyone what they're fighting for. Not abstract concepts like peace or balance, but concrete, personal reasons why this war needs to end. Katara talks about her mother, about making sure no other child loses a parent to Fire Nation violence. Sokka mentions his father about proving that regular people can be heroes too. Toph says something characteristically blunt about how the war is boring and she'd like to go back to doing whatever she wants without worrying about genocide. Zuko's turn. He thinks about everything that brought him here. The Agni Kai, 3 years of hunting the Avatar, months as a refugee, the choice to leave everything behind for what's right. He says he's fighting to prove Sozin was wrong, that the betrayal of friendship for power was the wrong choice, that connection matters more than conquest, that some things, like love, like honor, like choosing who you want to be, can't be taken by force or given by authority. He's fighting to honor Roku's legacy instead of Sozin's, to be the person his mother saved him to become, to make sure his uncle's faith in him wasn't misplaced, and maybe, just maybe, to save Azula from herself if she'll let him. Though honestly, that one's a long shot. They sit together as the sun sets, watching the horizon like they can see the future approaching. In a few days, everything will change. The war will end one way or another, either with Aang finding that impossible third option and the Fire Nation surrendering, or with catastrophic failure and genocide succeeding despite their best efforts. The weight of the world rests on their shoulders. They're just kids, teenagers playing at being heroes because no one else is available for the role. But they're also the best hope anyone has, which is either inspiring or terrifying depending on how you look at it. Zuko thinks about his family tree, about being descended from both betrayer and betrayed, about having the genetics of conquest and the choice of peace. His blood doesn't determine his destiny. He does, one decision at a time, until those decisions add up to a life he can defend without shame. Tomorrow they leave. Tomorrow the final confrontation begins. Tomorrow Zuko faces his sister in an Agni Kai that'll determine the Fire Nation's future, but tonight he's just part of Team Avatar sitting with friends, watching the sun set on the eve of the war's conclusion. He's ready. Not because he's confident they'll win, the odds are terrifying and the stakes couldn't be higher, but because he's finally fighting for the right reasons, standing with the right people, honouring the right legacy. Whatever happens in the next few days, Zuko knows he made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the choice that led to comfort or approval or safety, but the right choice. And sometimes that's all you can do. Choose right over easy, over and over, until it becomes who you are instead of who you're trying to be. Sozin chose power. Roku chose balance. Zuko chooses to be better than both, to learn from Sozin's mistakes and honour Roku's sacrifice by being the bridge his ancestors should have been to each other. That's his legacy. That's his inheritance. And come tomorrow, when the comet arrives and the final battle begins, he'll prove that bloodlines suggest but don't determine that anyone can choose to be better than their worst inheritance. One choice at a time. One moment at a time. Until the boy who was burned for compassion becomes the man who uses that compassion to help end a war. That's the real power of Zuko's mixed heritage. Not that he's descended from both sides of a historic betrayal, but that he's living proof that people can choose their own meaning, their own legacy, their own path forward regardless of where they came from. And that's more powerful than any royal bloodline could ever be. Sozin's comet appears in the sky like a wound torn across the heavens, bleeding red light that makes every firebender on the planet feel like they've been plugged directly into the sun. The power is intoxicating, overwhelming, dangerous in the hands of people who've spent a century using fire as a weapon rather than a gift. Zuko feels it the moment the comet enters range. His firebending multiplies exponentially. Flames that usually require focus and effort now spring to life with barely a thought. It's like trying to control a wildfire with your bare hands. Possible, but requiring constant attention, or everything burns. This is what Ozai has been waiting for. This cosmic boost that'll let him incinerate the Earth Kingdom in a single day. Genocide on a scale that makes the Air Nomad massacre look like a rehearsal. Team Avatar splits up according to plan. Aang flies toward Ozai's location on a lion turtle. Long story. Involves spiritual intervention and a last-minute power-up that might solve the whole "how do I stop the Fire Lord without killing him" dilemma. Sokka, Toph and Suki head for the airship fleet, armed with determination and a frankly concerning amount of explosives. And Zuko flies toward the Fire Nation capital with Katara, heading straight into the heart of everything he left behind to become something better. The journey on Appa takes hours that feel like minutes. They don't talk much, both processing what they're about to do, both aware that facing Azula during the comet is possibly the worst idea anyone's ever had, both going anyway because someone has to, and they're the only ones available. Katara breaks the silence eventually, asks Zuko if he's okay. Not about the mission, not about the plan, just if he's okay, emotionally, about facing his sister in what might be a fight to the death. Zuko considers lying, saying he's fine, maintaining the stoic mask he wore for years. Instead, he tells the truth. He's terrified. Not of Azula's skill or power. He's faced her before, knows what she's capable of. He's terrified of what she's become, of the possibility that there's nothing left of his sister except the weapon Ozai shaped her into. He's terrified that killing her might be necessary, and he's terrified that he might not be able to do it when the moment comes. Katara nods with understanding, says that fear means he's still human, still capable of compassion even for someone who's hurt him repeatedly, says it's what separates him from his father. Ozai wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't feel conflict about hurting his children. Zuko does, which means he's already won the most important battle. They arrive at the capital as the sun sets, the sky stained red from the comet's influence. The city is eerily quiet. Most citizens are hiding, uncertain what the Phoenix King's coronation means for them, whether this new era will bring prosperity or just more war. The palace grounds are nearly empty. Guards have been dismissed, servants sent away, everyone cleared out except Azula herself. They find her in the courtyard designated for royal Agni Kai ceremonies, and the sight stops Zuko cold. His sister looks like she's unravelling in real time. Her hair is dishevelled, partially cut by her own hand in what might have been an attempt at grooming but looks more like self-harm. Her eyes are wild, darting, seeing threats that aren't there. She's muttering to herself, having conversations with absent people, checking behind pillars for assassins who don't exist. This isn't the calculating, controlled Azula who's tormented him for years. This is someone having a complete psychological breakdown, and it's simultaneously terrifying and heartbreaking because she's still his sister under all that damage. Azula spots them. Her face cycles through emotions, surprise, rage, paranoia, something that might be relief except she's forgotten how to express it healthily. She immediately accuses them of treachery, of conspiracy, of being part of a plot by her father to test her, or by her mother to judge her, or by literally everyone to destroy her. Zuko tries to talk to her, genuinely tries, approaching with open hands, speaking softly, offering to help if she'll just stand down and let them end this peacefully. Azula laughs. It's not her usual controlled, mocking laugh. It's high and broken and filled with years of repressed pain finally erupting. She says she doesn't need help. She's fine. She's perfect. She's the Fire Lord, and everyone else is the problem. Then she challenges Zuko to an Agni Kai. Traditional rules, one-on-one, winner takes the throne. She knows she should fight both of them. Strategically, facing Zuko and Katara together makes more sense. But her pride, her need to prove she's better than her brother even while falling apart, demands single combat. Zuko accepts, not because he wants to fight her, not because he thinks this will solve anything, but because she's not giving him a choice. If he refuses, she'll attack anyway, and at least an Agni Kai has rules, has structure, has the possibility of ending without unnecessary death. Katara protests. She didn't come here to watch. She came to fight alongside Zuko. But he asks her to trust him, says he needs to face his sister alone, that this confrontation has been building since childhood and needs resolution without outside interference. She agrees reluctantly, positioning herself where she can intervene if necessary, already planning water sources she can use if this goes sideways. The Agni Kai begins as the comet reaches its peak intensity. Both Zuko and Azula are supercharged, capable of generating fire on a scale that should be impossible, but where Zuko's flames are controlled, purposeful, drawn from life energy and inner peace, Azula's are chaotic, desperate, fueled by fear and paranoia, and the crushing weight of never being good enough despite being perfect at everything. The fight is beautiful and terrible in equal measure. They move like dancers whose choreography was written in childhood trauma, each knowing the other's style intimately because they learned together before everything fell apart. Fire arcs across the courtyard in colours ranging from orange to blue, creating patterns that would be artistic if they weren't trying to kill each other. But something's wrong with Azula's technique. Her movements are erratic, her fire unfocused. She's always been precise, calculated, the better bender by pure technical skill. Tonight she's sloppy, making mistakes she'd never make if she was thinking clearly. Zuko realizes mid-fight that he's going to win, not through superior skill or power, but because Azula is destroying herself, burning out from the inside, unable to maintain the perfection that's defined her entire existence. It's tragic in ways that make him want to stop, to forfeit, to throw the match and try to help her instead. But stopping now would insult her worse than defeat, would prove she needs help, needs rescue, isn't as perfect as she's spent her life trying to be. So he fights, matches her strike for strike, defense for offense, giving her the respect of taking her seriously even as she falls apart. Then Azula does something unexpected. She generates lightning, the technique that requires absolute internal balance and emotional control. The technique she's perfected through years of practice. Except tonight, with her mind fragmenting and her emotions spiraling, she can't generate it properly. The lightning forms, but it's unstable, crackling wrong, building charge without proper direction. She aims it at Zuko, who's ready to redirect it using Iroh's technique, who's prepared to survive this strike and end the fight. Then Azula's eyes flick to Katara. Just for a second, but it's enough. She redirects mid-strike, sending the lightning toward the waterbender standing on the sidelines, because hurting Zuko directly isn't enough. She needs to hurt him by destroying someone he cares about. Zuko moves without thinking, throws himself between the lightning and Katara, taking the bolt full in the chest because that's what you do for family. Not the family you're born into, but the family you choose, the people who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. The lightning enters through his chest. His own redirection technique activates partially, instinctively, trying to guide the energy through his body and out. But it's too much power, too close, too direct. The electricity courses through him, stopping his heart, locking his muscles, burning from the inside out. He drops, just collapses like a puppet with cut strings, smoke rising from the entry wound, barely conscious and completely paralyzed. Katara screams, moves into action with the fury of someone who's already lost too many people to Fire Nation violence, who's not losing another friend, not today, not while she can still fight. The battle that follows is short and brutal. Azula is powerful, supercharged by the comet, wielding blue fire that should be unstoppable. But Katara is fighting for Zuko's life, drawing water from every available source, using techniques she's mastered through months of training and natural talent that rivals any bender in history. She chains Azula, literally chains her with ice that even comet-boosted firebending can't break, pinning the Fire Lord to the grate she's standing on, rendering her immobile and defeated. Azula breaks. Not physically. Physically she's just restrained. But psychologically, emotionally, the defeat is the final proof that she's not perfect, not unbeatable, not worthy of the love she's spent her life trying to earn through achievement. She screams and cries and thrashes against the chains, and it's horrible to witness, because this isn't a villain getting what she deserves. This is a girl who was abused into becoming a weapon, who's breaking under the weight of impossible expectations, who needed therapy and love but got training and conditional approval instead. Katara doesn't gloat, doesn't celebrate victory, just secures the chains and immediately runs to Zuko, using spirit water to heal the lightning damage, pouring everything she has into keeping him alive. The healing works, barely, but it works. Zuko's heart restarts, his breathing stabilizes, and he opens his eyes to see Katara crying with relief above him. He tries to make a joke, something about lightning not being as bad the second time, but his voice is too weak to properly land the humor. They stay like that for a while, Zuko recovering, Katara maintaining the healing, Azula sobbing in the background because her breakdown has reached the point where she's not dangerous anymore, just broken. News reaches them eventually. Aang defeated Ozai, didn't kill him, found that third option through energy bending, removing the Fire Lord's bending entirely, rendering him powerless without taking his life. The war is over. The genocide was prevented. The Fire Nation surrendered. They won. Against impossible odds, with everything stacked against them, they actually won. Zuko processes this information slowly, still recovering from nearly dying. The war is over, his father is defeated, Azula is imprisoned, and he's... what? The heir? The next Fire Lord by default because everyone else in line for succession is either powerless or insane? The thought is terrifying. He spent 3 years trying to reclaim a throne he thought he wanted, and now that it's being handed to him, all he can think about is whether he's ready. Whether anyone could be ready to lead a nation that spent a century learning the wrong lessons about power and honour. But someone has to. Someone has to start the work of transforming the Fire Nation from a conquering empire into a nation that can coexist peacefully with others. Someone has to make reparations, establish accountability, teach a new generation that strength isn't about domination. It might as well be someone who's experienced both sides, who's been a prince and a refugee, who's committed terrible acts and learned to be better, who's descended from both the Avatar and the Fire Lord who betrayed him. The coronation happens days later, after Zuko recovers enough to stand without assistance. It's not the grand ceremony Ozai would have demanded, just a simple acknowledgement of succession, witnessed by Fire Nation nobility who are still processing that their century-long war ended in defeat. Zuko stands before the throne, wearing robes that feel like a costume, preparing to accept a crown he's not sure he deserves. The weight of responsibility presses down harder than any physical object could, because leading the Fire Nation through reconstruction is going to be harder than any battle he's fought. Then the doors open, and Iroh walks in. His uncle. His teacher. The person who never gave up on him even when Zuko gave up on himself. Iroh, who Zuko betrayed in Ba Sing Se, who had every right to discard him as a lost cause, who apparently heard about the coronation and came anyway. For a moment, they just stare at each other across the throne room. Years of separation, betrayal, redemption compressed into eye contact that communicates everything words can't. Then Zuko does what he should have done months ago in the Crystal Catacombs. He crosses the room, kneels before his uncle and apologises. Not a perfunctory "I'm sorry," but a genuine acknowledgement of how badly he hurt Iroh, how his choice in Ba Sing Se was wrong, how he's spent every day since trying to become worthy of Iroh's faith in him. Iroh lifts him up. Doesn't say it's okay, it wasn't okay, and they both know it. But he says he's proud of who Zuko has become, of the choices he's made since that betrayal, of his commitment to being better than his bloodline suggested. They embrace, and Zuko cries openly because he's been carrying the weight of Iroh's disappointment for months, and having it lifted feels like breathing after being underwater too long. His uncle says he knew Zuko would find his way eventually, says that redemption isn't a destination but a practice, something you do every day through small choices and consistent effort. Says he's honoured to witness the Fire Lord who'll help heal the world instead of burning it. The coronation proceeds. Zuko accepts the crown with humility and terror in equal measure, makes promises about reparations and peace, and working with other nations to undo a century of damage. He knows these promises will be hard to keep, that rebuilding trust takes generations, that some wounds don't fully heal. But he's going to try, going to show up every day and do the work, make the hard choices, prove that the Fire Nation can be better than its worst history. His first act as Fire Lord is ending the war officially, recalling all troops, establishing prisoner exchanges. His second act is requesting a meeting with the other nations' leaders to begin reparations discussions. His third act is visiting Azula in her cell. She's calmer now, sedated, no longer screaming but still deeply broken. Zuko tells her he's sorry, for leaving her behind, for escaping while she drowned in Ozai's expectations, for not trying to save her until it was too late. He can't help her if she won't accept help, but he's going to make sure she receives treatment instead of execution, that someone tries to heal her mind instead of just punishing her for being the weapon Ozai shaped her into. Azula doesn't respond, just stares at the wall, and Zuko leaves not knowing if she even heard him, but knowing he had to try. Weeks pass. The Fire Nation begins the slow process of transformation. Trials for war criminals, reparations payments, educational reforms that teach true history instead of propaganda. It's messy and complicated and full of resistance from people who benefited from the old system. Zuko navigates it all with Team Avatar's support. They're not just his friends anymore, they're his advisors, his conscience, the people who remind him why he chose this harder path when the easy path looked tempting. Then comes the final scene. Team Avatar reunites in Ba Sing Se at Iroh's new tea shop, The Jasmine Dragon, rebuilt after the war in the upper ring where it belongs. They're just teenagers sitting together, drinking tea, laughing about something Sokka said that probably wasn't as funny as everyone's pretending. Zuko serves tea alongside his uncle, and there's something perfect about that image. The Fire Lord doing manual labour, choosing service over being served, honouring his uncle's wisdom about finding dignity in simple work. Aang makes a joke about their journey, about how they went from enemies to friends to basically family. Katara adds that it's the weirdest found family ever, spanning all 4 nations and including a flying bison who eats more than the rest of them combined. Toph says she's just here for the tea and the company, in that order. Sokka argues the order should be reversed. Suki mediates while clearly thinking they're both ridiculous. And Zuko? Zuko sits with these people who changed his life, who believed in him when he didn't believe in himself, who gave him chances he didn't deserve until he earned them through consistent action. He thinks about his journey, from prince to refugee to traitor to Fire Lord, from hunting the Avatar to teaching him firebending, from desperate need for his father's approval to genuine satisfaction from being the kind of person his uncle and mother would be proud of. It wasn't quick, it wasn't easy, and it's not finished. He'll be working on becoming better for the rest of his life, because that's what redemption actually means. Not a moment of dramatic change, but a lifetime of choosing right over easy, honour over comfort, growth over stagnation. Zuko's story is about a kid who had everything, lost everything, and then discovered that having honour means nothing if you can't live with yourself. He went from hunting the Avatar to serving tea with him, from prince to refugee to Fire Lord, from monster to hero. But really, he just became himself, the self he would have been all along if someone had loved him unconditionally from the start. Lucky for him, someone did. Uncle Iroh never gave up, and neither did Zuko. That's the thing about redemption. It's not about being perfect. It's about getting back up every time you fall and keep trying to be better than you were yesterday. Zuko spent 3 seasons learning that lesson, and honestly, he's still learning it. But hey, at least now he's got friends, a flying bison that drools on him, and an uncle who makes questionable tea. That's got to count for something. The sun sets over Ba Sing Se, painting the sky in colours that look like fire but feel like peace. Team Avatar sits together, a family built from former enemies and shared struggle, proof that people can change if they choose to, and others choose to believe in them. Zuko looks around at these faces, friends who became family, who forgave the unforgivable, who gave him chances until he finally earned them, and he allows himself something he rarely permits: contentment. Not happiness, because the work ahead is too immense for simple happiness. Not satisfaction, because there's too much to fix and too many amends to make. Just contentment with this moment, this company, this version of himself that he fought so hard to become. He's the Fire Lord who ended a war instead of starting one, the prince who chose honour over approval, the student who learned from everyone, from Iroh's wisdom, from Aang's idealism, from Katara's strength, from his own mistakes. He's Zuko. Descended from both the Avatar and the Fire Lord who betrayed him, carrying both legacies, choosing every day which one to honour through his actions. And surrounded by friends in a tea shop in Ba Sing Se, drinking jasmine tea and laughing at terrible jokes, he's exactly where he needs to be. Not because the journey's over, the journey never really ends. Redemption is continuous practice, not a destination you reach and then coast. But because he's finally on the right path, finally walking toward light instead of chasing shadows, finally becoming the person he was always capable of being, if someone had just shown him that love doesn't have to be earned through violence and worth, doesn't depend on approval from people who were never going to give it anyway. The scar on his face will never fade. Some wounds don't heal. They just become part of your story, reminders of where you've been and how far you've come. But scars also mean you survived. Mean you endured something that should have broken you and came out the other side. Zuko survived his father's cruelty, his exile, his mistakes, himself, and now he's helping build a world where fewer people will carry scars like his, where children can grow up without learning that love is conditional and compassion is weakness. That's his legacy, not conquest or domination, or proving himself worthy through violence, just the daily work of being better, doing better, building better, And honestly, that's the most powerful thing any Fire Lord has ever accomplished.